All right, now there's audio. Every stream, I start by like going and just like making noises because it like I don't know warms me up. Um, but I usually mute when I do that, so most of my streams start muted, and then I turn out that. Oh, mm, hello there, General Kenobi. Thoughts on Tate? Um, I don't know. I find like every red pill, like ultra masculine guy kind of cringe. I think that he's like not, I don't know. I think he's correct in some things, but like, how do I say this? I don't think women, I think women really respond to like men providing things for them. But so I think he gets that part of like the dating market right. I think that if you can provide things for a girl, I think she'll be very receptive and she'll see you as kind of an authority. And I also think it's good to like stand up for yourself. And so I think those are like good things. But I think he's sort of like he takes those ideas and just like extrapolates them to nothing. I did see him talk with Hassan. And oh, here's the other thing. He's like very into posturing as like a big, tough, strong guy, right? And so I think that when he goes up in discussions against like someone who's like XQC, who, no offense, is like he looks like a nerdy sort of gamer guy. He doesn't look like the kind of guy that you would assume is like a multi-millionaire, ultra competent Twitch streamer who has like his pick of women. He doesn't look like that right away. I think that Andrew Tate, with his muscles and the way that he sort of postures, he matches what is like the societal expectation for like the type of guy you expect to like get lots of women. At least for men, that's kind of what men expect, like an ultra masculine man to look like. And so when he gets into debates that are very like wishy-washy, murky, where like it's kind of just like both people are presenting viewpoints, but neither has like objective data or like studies to back it up. I think that Andrew Tate can like win those because he can just like muscle through his worldview and it's a lot more appealing, and he's got like more charisma when he presents it. And so I think Hassan is like also kind of one of these people where like Hassan benefits from looking like masculine and handsome and like cool and exuding this aura of like chadness. And so I think that he's like kind of the perfect person to go against Andrew Tate because the things that really appeal to people about Andrew Tate, Hassan also appeals to them. And so if Hassan can make like a better factual argument, like hitting him really hard on like the women driver thing, where like Andrew Tate's just completely factually, objectively wrong on. If you can hit him hard on that and then also posture better, I think you can like totally destroy Andrew Tate. And I think that's kind of what Hassan did. But I would have liked to have seen Hassan debate Andrew Tate more and actually go into more, depth. Because I don't really think they like got into major disagreements. It was really just like a factual thing about like, are women better or worse drivers than men? In which case, like, Tate just seems kind of wrong. I don't find Tate attractive either. It's his face. He looks like nerdy when he's like not wearing his sunglasses. Like when he's in a video and he's like, "Men, you have to do this," and he just looks like a goofball. I mean, obviously, like he's got like his physique is impressive, and I think that like he does a really good job on that. And like I don't know, I don't find him particularly attractive though. You know who I do find attractive? Derek, of More Plates, More Dates. I think he is attractive. I also think his way of making money is like not very honorable. His decision to like pimp women out, I think like uh it's like pure just like sort of social manipulation that he's able to get into that position. But it doesn't really speak to like particularly advanced like business acumen or like incredible insight into markets. Like sex work is incredibly profitable, but you don't really need like an organizer for it. And so I think like his ability to like skim millions of dollars off of the work of like sex workers is like really doesn't speak to like his ability to like produce things in the world. It just speaks to his ability to like manipulate chicks, which I think is like pretty not impressive. So I think when he talks like big game about like, being able to make all of this money, I'm like, I think you were just kind of right place at the right time. Not super impressed. Yeah, I hate all women. I'm a misogynist. Extreme edition, extreme misogynist. And you should clip that and you should send that to Twitch. And you should be like, this girl hates women because it's true. Well, here's the thing. So, like, everyone who's very successful, it's a mixture of luck and also talent, right? So I think Andrew Tate has like a genuine talent for getting women to like do things that he wants. And I think he was also in the right place at the right time. But I think that like in general, there's not much you can do to like boost, how do I say this? Boost the income of sex workers as like a manager. And so there are some professions like actors where like having a manager or an agent or something is like really valuable and important, and that can like lead to people it can make or break careers. The music industry is like a little bit like this as well because it's like so based on connections. But the sex work industry I don't think is this way. I think the sex work industry is like really based on just like how you can play to like algorithms. And maybe this was less true when Andrew Tate was making this money. That's possible. The industry may have changed since I've gotten involved with it. But when I started on Chatterbait, like first stream, I had like 1,000 viewers, and I didn't have any connections or anything. It was just like I started up the camera and was able to get like a very large following very quickly. And so it was just because like the algorithms on these websites are like very good at creating people from nothing. And TikTok is like this as well. And connections do matter, but you don't really need a manager for them. What you really need is like just to like talk to other sex workers. And so like I think what we've seen increasingly is sex workers getting together in groups and working with each other, but they don't need like middlemen. And so I think Tate made his money as like a middleman. So yeah, you're saying like you really need a pimp on the internet. And this thing is like it's like the one area of sex where you really don't need a pimp. Like you can just do it all yourself. So the value proposition of someone like Tate, I think, is like very weak. Oh, I guess here's like a more succinct way to put it. All of those women probably could have made more money without him than with him, which is a good indication that his behavior is like kind of, it's like a free rider rent seeking behavior. Well, I think if he wasn't there, I mean, like a good number of women probably would have never entered the industry, but the ones that did probably would have made the same amount of money or very comparable. Um, if they did make less, they probably would have made less, but not so much less that they take away less than if he was taking some off the top. So like if they made 10% less and he took 20% on average, you know, I think they still would have done better being alone and taking that 10% cut rather than giving him 20% for like management stuff. That's my insight as someone who's been in sex work. Mm-hmm. Right. That's the other thing why it's like a little bit suspect, right? And like I have no idea if this is, I don't know the validity of this because I don't really know his situation. But like you do actually need pimps and like middlemen if you're engaging in escort stuff or if you're engaging in real life sex work or if you're like, running a ring which is more coercive towards girls. And so then I think that his like value is higher, but it's also you're engaging in behaviors then that would be like unethical and illegal. So like I don't know if he did engage in anything unethical or illegal. I wouldn't be willing to like make accusations, but I think it would make more sense. Um, I think his role would be less like luck and more like skill if he was involved in something unethical. Though I would just assume that like I don't know. My default assumption is that he just sort of got lucky and was not like it was not a very skill based position that he was in, and therefore it wasn't unethical. But I don't know. I do think it's kind of either or. Okay, I'm gonna join this voice chat. Wait, oh, that's rough. Her studio used to take almost half her earnings. So this would be like a question for her. Is like, why did she go with the studio? Because I understand if the studio has like equipment that she doesn't have, like if she's unable to get a camera or internet connection. But I think if you're going to do sex work, it doesn't make sense to go with a studio, at least not with the current landscape. I know that in the past, people were like, "Oh, hello,
Hey there. How
I'm
you doing?
doing good. I'm streaming, by the way, so don't say anything crazy. Just fair warning, no slurs."
You ain't got to worry about slurs with me, but I'll
Okay.
mute myself anyway.
No, yeah, you're good. I think it's always good just to give people a warning. Okay, so I am in the chat. We're gonna have our discussions. Oh, I really don't know my positions on these things. I haven't thought them out that well. It's like a sex work panel. This is the business hand position. If I'm making deals, this is the hand form that I do. $1 million. $500,000. I'll give you $250,000 for 5% stake. Yeah, very professional. Very serious business hands. What about Shionhead's neo slurs for bisexuals? Are they still allowed still? What are those? I am nowhere. Exactly. When I do this, people start wanting to make transactions. They're like, oh my God, how do I get into business? This is the one thing I learned while getting my business degree. Oh, there's another person in the chat.
How you doing, Mr. Wick? How are you?
So far, so good. Just waiting on everyone to kind of make their way on in here. We'll kind of get everyone started in a minute.
Yeah.
They can't
When I
see or
got my
hear me
business
yet,
degree,
by the way.
this is the one thing I
so-
learned.
Yep. So I finally figured out what was wrong with my audio. Like I just kind of had to reset all my audio. How am I coming through right now? Am I coming through good?
Good to me. Sounds good to me.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I had to reset all my audio stuff because I was really hoping to get more involved in the panel, but because I couldn't figure out what was going on, I was really getting irritated. Like,
It happens. It happens. But yeah, we're just waiting on the rest of the people to show up. It's 5 minutes early, and as people are on streamer time, so they'll probably show up at 6:05 or something. But regardless,
Yep.
at 6 o'clock we'll go live on my end. And
John, it's just a bug. Just my cats.
I am currently streaming, by the way.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Good thing you warned me. I was about to say all my favorite slurs.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I was about to just go off on a rant of some sort. Anyway.
Thought I'd warn you. I know how hard it is to hold back those gamer words.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Been a while. Thanks for agreeing to come on, by the way, Tate. Really appreciate it. It'll be nice
for sure.
Nice to have your perspective on this.
I think it'll be good.
I think so too. A few of them are in my other room. I'll just drag them in.
Yep. Oh, boy. So how's your day so far, Wick?
So far, so good. Somebody, Mr. Braindead, hello.
Oh, wait, I'm not. All right, we're back to reality.
It's the Biteies. The Biteies.
Hold on.
How's it going?
Shit ready. Hold on.
I believe Shionhead
What's up, Wick?
follows
you
me
know,
on Twitter.
living life.
She probably has me
That's
like
funny. I liked
muted
you last
or
night.
something.
How
I would
did the rest of the
assume.
panel go after I left?
But like she does follow me, I'm pretty sure.
I didn't listen, honestly. I think it lasted for about 10 more minutes.
We hung out for a bit. We talked about, the end of where it went. It kind of looped a little bit. Then Alexa changed the subject over to the state of Twitch politics and what the status for streamers is. We threw out all the non-streamers.
She does follow
and
me.
we kind of said, oh, everything is great. Everything is terrible. These are just the normal loops. And this is going to be the continued loop that comes back around again. And then other people were like, no, it's actually on fire this time and it's never coming back. And, then it ended.
Well, That's hopeful.
Mr. Brandon, you got a camera today?
I do. Hold on one second. I had to clean up this room. What's up?
No, yeah, we don't care if your room's messy. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, I had to move the recycling can from behind the screen and stuff like that, and I had to move my reflective vest too because I don't need people knowing where I work at. So,
Mr. Braindead, the only tips I would give you on your like scene layout is you might consider raising your camera up higher. Not today at all, but raise your camera up higher, and then at some point you might want to kill the light behind you because it's putting shadow on your face.
Oh yeah, you know what? It
Unless
is
you're intentionally
daylight. Hold on one
shadowing it.
second. I'll be right back.
I always find it a little bit cringe when people give like hardcore advice on like stream layout. Because I feel like if you have good content, it doesn't matter that much. But everyone acts like they have everything totally figured out.
Madam
like the beer,
Genevieve
too.
should be here any second.
I don't know. To me,
I
like
haven't heard
trans
from
women,
Introvert.
it's really hard.
Somebody, have you
I
talked
don't
to
think
Introvert?
there's any easy
I have
way.
not seen Introverb in a couple of days.
Well, that's concerning, but the show must go on, and I'll DM Stabby right now.
yep. Yeah, Stabby and I were
Stabby.
talking to each other in great. Yeah, she and I were talking in great detail yesterday. She and I both militaries. Yes.
Oh,
Oh, you cut off there.
Yeah, Alex, your internet is trying to kill you today.
Oh my God. How's that? Is that better?
Well, your video is chunky, but your audio is fandabulous.
Oh, okay, cool.
Oh, now your video's coming back in. Must have just been an internet blip.
I've got DSL, so you have to forgive me.
Okay, just to let everyone know, I think you've all been on my show before, but it's been a while for a couple of you. So how this works, I'll introduce the topic. I'll say hi to everyone. I'll give everyone a chance to introduce themselves, have an opening statement. Then we're just going to go into a discussion, right? The only thing I ask is you attack each other's ideas rather than each other directly. But other than that, yeah, feel free. If you find yourself unable to get a word in edgewise, hands. Sorry. Yeah, we will be going live on my end in 5, 4. Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of the Death of Certainty Show, where we recognize that, no matter how right we think we are, there's a chance or a possibility we might be wrong. So we need to listen to all the voices in the room, give them a chance to be heard, and take them seriously. So I am joined today by a slew of lovely guests to discuss the sex industry. We're still waiting on a few people. A couple of them let me know they'd be a little late. Madam Genevieve is on her way, as is Sharon. But as soon as they get in here, we'll pull them in and we'll mock them lightly for being a little late, and it'll be fine. But how are the rest of you doing? How's everyone today?
The
Doing
cat
well,
woke me up at
actually.
3:30 this morning, so I'm barely alive, but I am here.
Glad to have it. Glad to have you. Yeah, Tapdadge, do you have a camera so my viewers can see you? Or
how's
awesome.
that?
It works out for me.
Excellent.
Excellent. How's everyone's audio, gang? By the way, can chat? Can you hear them fine? Is
Yeah.
everyone coming through?
Yeah. Everything sound good on my end. I just want to make sure that I'm still sounding good because Mr. Brain did. I was able to figure it out earlier. I just reset all my voice volume control stuff. So
Nice. Yeah, I meant to message you. I thought you would hit me back up, honestly, but hey, I'm happy.
yeah, I was doing chores earlier. I had to mow the lawn, stuff like that. So yippee.
I didn't do shit today. I worked, but I had 2 phone calls, and that was it. So I got a full day's worth of work and did fucking nothing.
Give me 1 second, gang. They can hear my fan, and I don't want them to hear my fan, so I'm gonna go turn off my fan. But no gamer words while I'm gone. I'll be right back.
This is a huge panel, but so far, only the people with penises have made it on time. So maybe that tells you a lot about the state of the world.
Well, that's where I keep my watch, so it's easy to keep track of time that way.
Exactly. Women have no ability to keep track of time.
Well, there's just nothing convenient to strap their watches to.
Mm-mm. They get it lost inside of them
Oh, goodness.
too easily. It's a big problem.
I'm not sure the context to that. Like, I don't know the context of that statement.
It's
but
all
okay.
good, and
We
it
were
wasn't
pointing out that
misogynistic.
only the
so.
penis bearers had arrived early, and I had insinuated that that was because that's where I keep my watch. And then we were pointing out the fact that if the female group tried to attempt the same thing, it would be difficult to fish the watch out every time they needed to find out what time it was.
That was a joke.
Fair enough. No, I'll allow it. It's good. We're here for the humor too, gang. It's gonna be, you get a comedy and education, edutainment. That's what it is tonight, gang. Anyway, Madam Genevieve, nice to see you. Oh, we may be having some issues. Can you hear us, Madam Genevieve?
Guys, I don't know if you can hear me. I can't hear you. You know
We
what?
can hear
There we go.
you.
I just got it. I just fixed it.
Yay!
Hey,
Just
Hi,
had to
Genevieve. How are
finesse
ya?
a bit. Oh, I'm good. How are y'all doing?
Doing well.
Excellent.
Glad to see ya.
We're gonna give it another 2 minutes. Wait. Oh, speaking of the devils.
Madam Genevieve, you are a little bit quiet on my end. I don't know if you can turn up your microphone in Discord or in Windows in any way. I've got you at 200%. You're still a little bit low for me.
Okay, I'm gonna move my microphone a little closer. Also, that might help.
Stabby, hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Do you have a camera for us today?
I think in a second. It looks like it's all gonna work.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'll have the camera up here in just a second.
Awesome. Okay, now we are only missing Cherry and Introverb. And Introverb gang, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know if she's gonna show. I hope she does. But I haven't heard from her since that initial invite.
She has a
So
little bit of a chaotic work schedule. She tends to come and go from time to time. We will hope and pray, but I have had her miss my schedule a couple of times.
What does she do for
when in
work?
doubt, blame Yamato.
sorry, say that again. Repeat that, please.
What does she do for work that keeps her busy?
I'm not 100% positive on it, but I believe that she is in production in some way, involved with some other people. I want to say is an independent contractor of some sort and does consulting for a variety of different people.
Interesting. That could mean a lot of things. It's a very broad job description.
Well, I have no idea. I've only barely known this fantastic individual.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I only spoke to her once, but she seemed interesting enough that I'd like to have her on my show, and she graciously accepted the invite. And well, here we are. Again, hopefully she shows, but if not, that's okay, gang, because we have a wonderful show today. Gang, tonight we are going to be talking about the sex industry. We're going to be talking about the effects it has on society and culture, how it deals with its workers, right? We're going to be talking about the consumer, from the consumer side of the sex industry, how it's marketed, and maybe the harmful ways it reaches out to its audience, perhaps, maybe the harmful stereotypes that it projects. But we don't know. Like, what pros does the sex industry have? What benefits does it provide to society and to the people who work within it? We're going to talk about all that. We're going to discuss it, and it's going to be grand. Cherry will get here when Cherry gets here, but I
I don't know
know
if
that
I'm
some of you have
conservative.
places to be, and I want to respect your time, so we're just going to get right into it
I think
with
I'm
opening
not
statements. As I was telling the
progressive,
people before everyone else got here,
but I'm not sure
we're
I'm
going to give
conservative.
brief opening statements to everyone. Introduce yourself, give your thoughts on the sex industry, and maybe if you have experience with it, that would be the time to disclose if you'd like. Then also, we are going to just get into it. Attack each other's ideas rather than each other. If you can't get in, alpha hands, raise your hand. Let me see it, and I'll make sure to get you in order. If I tell you to shut up and stop talking, it's not a dig against you. I'm not trying to attack you. I'm just trying to make clarity for the audience. Because when you all start talking at once, no one can understand anything, and I want everyone to be able to hear and understand your points. So please respect. When I tell you to shut up, just listen. That's all I'm saying. I'm looking at you, somebody. I know how you do it, right? I know you like to buck against my authority, but we'll work it out. So I guess we'll start with Madam Genevieve. Hello.
Oh, sorry, I was trying to play with my mic there. I don't know if that's any better for you guys at all. I don't know if I was able to do anything or
So
not,
far, so
but
good. Yes.
to jump right in, I am Madam Genevieve. Genevieve is
Uh-oh, we're
perfectly
getting some feedback from Stabby. Stabby, can you mute yourself for a minute? Okay, try again. I'm sorry, Madam Genevieve. We were just
No
getting that
problem.
echo.
No problem. My name is Genevieve, and I'm happy to be here talking about this subject. I am an online sex worker and also an in real life sex worker, so hopefully I can provide some insight from that side um, for you all today. I think that every industry is obviously going to come with its pros and cons, and clearly with higher risk comes higher reward in regards to financial earning possibility. Um, I think that in general, the biggest negatives with working in the industry come from the stigma, as well as obviously the increased risk for violence. But the positives, in my opinion, certainly for me in my circumstance, outweigh the negatives in that it does give a tremendous amount of personal freedom. It allows me to live in a very authentic way. I get to control my schedule however I want to, and essentially be the CEO of my own business. Beyond that, I really love helping people explore their sexuality and figure out what kind of does it for them, what their kink is, what they might want to try that they've never tried before. And I think that that's a really awesome service that I'm able to provide, is to help people explore things that they might not otherwise feel comfortable doing, or really have like a participant who could help them with that.
Okay, thank you. It should be an interesting discussion, and really glad to have your perspective here on this. Next up, we have Mr. Braindead. Please.
Yeah, I'm brain dead. I'm 100% pro sex work. I think that you should be able to do porn. I think that prostitution should be legal, highly regulated, but legal. And, trying to regulate the porn industry so we can fix some of those inequities and also, give people some personal freedom and some choice. And stop criminalizing something that wasn't criminal for a very, very long time. So that's it.
Thank you. Somebody online, please.
How you doing, folks? I'm somebody online. I do panels and things like this all the time. I have a little bit of experience working in the industry, not on the talent side of things, but more on like the management and the production side of things. I did event coordination for a long time and facilitated a variety of different things. The sex industry is a very interesting thing. And in any industry, when you push it into the black market, very questionable things start to happen. There's absolutely no regulation, there are no safeguards, and it becomes an extremely dangerous place for people to try to interact. You're not going to stop an industry from existing by pushing it into the black market. You're just going to stop it from existing legally and safely. Stop any regulation from being able to affect it. I think that we need a good regulation in the sex industry. We need to control it. We need to control who has access to it. That way we don't have a bunch of children finding out about things that they don't necessarily need to be finding out about, or having things advertised to them that they don't need advertised to them. But simultaneously, we need to enable consenting adults to be able to participate in consensual acts without stigmatizing them in society and creating a larger, like, how do we say, repressed society as a whole that we currently live in.
Okay, thank you. And it surprises me not at all that you used to be a producer and things like that. Not at all. Next up, we have Tap Dash, please.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's really hard to make generalizations about the sex industry just because there's so much variance within how it works. There's, people who are doing prostitution, who are doing escorting, people who are doing OnlyFans or camming. And every one of these categories is going to be very different, both on the consumer and the producer end, as far as the experience and the pros and cons. I would say that I'm not a fan of banning pornography. I've had some debates with people who tell me that, like, pornography is worse for society than heroin. I wouldn't go that far, but I do think we should be realistic about some of the consequences and difficulties that people experience with sex work. I think that pornography addiction is a very real issue for many men. I think that sex work can be very coercive for many women, especially women who are outside of the United States. I think that most women who enter the industry, they're not the top 0.1% earners who see renting out penthouse apartments. I think that my position within the industry, doing like OnlyFans and working like barely at all per week and like raking in money, is like very privileged and not really typical. Like, I experience the best version of the industry, but that's not really true for most people who are in it. And so I think that like it's a little bit irresponsible to like make arguments about how great it is when really it's not very great for the vast majority of people. I think that, as like a comparison as far as how bad or good sex work is, I think there are people who eat and drink themselves to death, but I don't think we should ban cakes or beer. And I feel a similar way with porn. I think it gets to be a little bit different when you start talking about, real life prostitution. This is something that pretty much, that's been very heavily regulated in pretty much every society in human history. And especially Western societies have been very careful with allowing this. And I think that that's for good reasons. And so if we are going to allow it in whatever form, we just have to be very careful with how that works.
Thank you. This is going to be a great discussion already. I can feel it. Alex Kirsch, please.
Yes. Hi, my name is Alex Kirsch from the Alex Kirsch Project. I normally do a podcast on Fridays at 6 p.m., but I'm doing a panel today. My podcast is called Current Events on Tap, where I talk about this week's current events, and then I also review one beer of the week, and then I just go assess like how the beer is, what have you. I am also in regards to pro sex work, primarily because I feel that there's a huge stigma about the sex work industry. As somebody that has spent a lot of time going to strip clubs, as somebody that's actually into the red light district in Germany, and somebody that was in the military, very, very familiar and have used porn quite a bit. Not ashamed to admit it. When it comes down to sex work, the biggest thing we need to remember is that it needs to be decriminalized, because the one thing people need to understand when it comes to sex work, the reason why I'm for it is because the key word that we need to look in here is consent. If people are in the sex work industry against their consent, then obviously that's a huge problem. That's something that we need to address. However, the reason why I say that we need to decriminalize is because far too often there are men and women in the sex work industry that have no way of getting out, let alone the fact that if they try to report to law enforcement, they could actually find themselves in a great deal of trouble, and they're not going to get any help from it. And then once they get released, then they got to deal with their handlers. And that's a really dangerous situation because just to break it down, human trafficking is still the second largest criminal enterprise in the world. Sex trafficking is the one that usually rakes in the most money. And we're not talking about consenting people. We're talking about people that are doing it by force. And that's the thing that we really need to focus on. But some people have a problem knowing the difference between the two. And that's the thing that we do really need to focus on. I've interviewed a former sex worker, Annie Lobert. She now tries to help women get out of the sex industry. And I've also attended a couple of human trafficking rallies. So let's just say that I've endorsed and I've actually participated in some of these events, but I'm also very much in favor of decriminalizing that way and breaking the stigma for those that work in the sex working industry.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we are going to break it down by different types of sex work as we go on, and just kind of try to hone in on each and the pros and cons.
Sure.
So next up, we have Stabby, please.
Guys, so I'm going to come in on the I am for sex work being legalized. I have a pretty big problem with the way it's been done now. I'm going to share an article with chat. It's an old Washington Post article, so I think that you have it available on Washington Post archives, and it won't have to be a subscription thing. One of the problems we have with sex work and the statistics we have now is that it's all being reported by people who aren't even trying to get the correct data. And we're all making these moral judgments and how a repressed society feels about sex this is something that we're always going to have going on. I want it to be safe. I want it to be regulated. And one of the things that my dad's a trucker, and he is part of an organization called Truckers Against Sex Work, and or Truckers Against, not sex work, I apologize, human trafficking. And what they do is they report if they see something that's going on. They try to help whenever they can. And one of the things that this organization understands is that you have to legalize it so that women, girls who have been coerced or who have been forced into this in any way, have the police to go to and are safe to actually come forward and ask for help. So I tend to agree with my dad. I think that we should absolutely legalize this, and we need to make sure that it is protected and that we are keeping an eye on how we're doing this.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes. Yeah, appreciate the perspective, and we're going to get into it. We have one more person to get their opening statements and to introduce themselves, and hopefully they know what we're talking about since she was a little late, but we won't hold that against her. Cherry, please.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Okay, hi,
You're good.
I'm Cherry. My take on sex work is that it should be legalized. I believe. I know that some people argue against legalization, so I wouldn't say that I am very like stubborn, feet in the ground on that, but that's where I'm towards. I would much rather that we were able to provide like regulations and stuff to make sure that the people who do want to be in sex work can do so safely.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. So with that, again, we'll get started. If you have trouble getting in, raise your hand and I'll put you in line. And remember, please, please, please attack each other's ideas rather than each other, if at all possible. But with that, the floor is open and let's discuss. Let's talk about it. Okay, not all at once. Fair enough. So I guess I'll start with this question then for everyone. So a lot of people are here for decriminalization, but they've mentioned regulations. What are some of the regulations do you think in this industry that it doesn't have yet, but we should have? What regulations when it comes to prostitution, for example, would you like to see hit the streets, so to speak?
I like the health regulations
the health
that
regulations.
you
Can
get
you be more
checked.
specific?
That the person who is offering sex, what what would you call that? The sex worker, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The person who is the sex worker, that they get regularly checked for STDs.
So we have here in Nevada the only legal brothels in the United States, and they're not legal everywhere in Nevada. They're only legal in the rural counties that are under a specific population level.
Reno.
But what was that?
I said Reno.
Yeah, Reno, and then
For
Nye
one-
County, which is about an hour outside of Las Vegas, and a few places like that. And I think that they do a really good job with their regulations that they have in place. They require every girl who works there to get tested once a week through a third-party doctor. They obviously require condoms for any kind of act that would be appropriate for them, or some other type of barrier protection if that's more appropriate. They have security both on the property and within the rooms. The ladies who work there actually have to have a sheriff's license, or it's a sheriff's card to work in the industry, and then have their business license as well with the state of Nevada. They are paying taxes. They are contributing to the community in that regard. And the success of their practices really speaks for itself. There has never been a reported incident of a client catching an STD or an STI from any one of the brothels in the entire time that they have been in legal practice.
Wow, that's amazing that not a single one.
Yeah,
What?
I was even go what.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say. I mean, that is fantastic because, and yeah, anywhere that there is legal sex work, they were required to get testing every month, and there is contraceptives available to prevent disease. And if I'm not mistaken, the client also has to be tested for STDs before they're allowed to actually
So-
partake, right? So they have to
so-
bring in it.
I can actually weigh in, honestly. So I actually went to Sherry's Ranch, which is in Pahrump, Nevada, and So like what the lady that the sex worker that I got with, what she does is, you know, she just asks me a few questions, and then what she does is she actually checked, you know, my package to see if there was any leakage or anything like that. She was actually physically checking everything like that. But the thing was, she was very specific about what I could or could not do with her, which is fine because it's her body. She's the one that can decide that at the end of the day. And so she was very clear about, and apparently she says that some sex workers have different boundaries, and those boundaries have to be respected, which that's the kind of regulation that I believe that I'm sure we are all in agreement upon.
Yeah, so these women function as independent contractors, right? So they get to set their prices, they get to set their rules and restrictions as far as what activities they want to participate in, what activities they don't participate in. And then, as I mentioned, they get tested weekly by a team of medical professionals. And then those same nurses or whoever it is also teach them on how to screen and look for symptoms and signs of possible infection in partners too. So there's a big emphasis on education and awareness.
And with
And I think it is
HIV-related
also
drugs,
important that you mention the boundaries too. One thing that is so crucial is that they do have the classification as independent contractors, and they are able to set their own rules. In a similar way, we saw recently in California that strippers went from being independent contractors to actually employees of the club. And people who do work in that industry have really had a tremendous amount of negative feelings with that classification switch because they're not able to have as much autonomy as they did before.
If
yeah, no,
I have to push back against that a little bit. I think that independent contractors in the sex industry world is a little bit predatory against
yes,
the people that are in these positions. I
I
feel
was going to
like
mention
it's
co-ops.
kind of a way to skirt around a lot of requirements for employers to guarantee different benefits, protections, and things like that to the people that work for them. I do understand that it is important that we make sure that these individual sex workers are able to like make sure that they feel safe in the situation that they're in. But this industry is ripe for exploitation, whether someone is a W-2 employee and being forced into this position, or if someone is a 1099 employee and is forced to kind of fend for themselves and have their own representation and their own management and form their own contracts in these situations. Both of these are potentially predatory. We need to make sure that like these people aren't being taken advantage of by their employers or by the clients.
And I think the thing is, as soon as you get into real life sex work, you start involving all of this infrastructure, which requires more people to be involved in the organization. You require like middlemen, people to set things up, people to, you know, own and rent property, to lease property where it's actually going to happen. And these are not necessarily issues that you deal with when you have online sex work, where you can have women who like individually choose to post sexy pictures or live stream themselves or whatever, and they have like full control to exit the situation whenever they want to, and really they're like have autonomy in the situation. But then when you get into real life sex work, it introduces this real problem of sex trafficking. And like there's some studies into this. I think there's one study that finds that across 150 different countries, when you legalize sex work, when you legalize prostitution, you see an increase in sex trafficking. And so that's really scary. And that's accounting for like, you know, if you legalize it, you might just like discover more. So it's like accounting for like that kind of that bias there. But the problem here is that like it really varies a lot from country to country. So like I know that in New Zealand, they found no connection between legalization or decriminalization of real life sex work and sex trafficking. But in Europe, where you have a lot more migration from Africa or from Eastern Europe, you have people who are less familiar with the local laws, less familiar with the local language, easier to be coerced. And then that's why you see like certain rises in, you know, in sex trafficking in some of these areas, which is, I think, just going back to what I said at the beginning, you have to be like really careful not to be increasing, you know, sex crimes in relationship to decriminalizing prostitution. And that's really also just like one variable. There are so many other issues with this. For example, like violence against women when they're engaged in this kind of work, even if they're not going to be criminalized for the actual prostitution itself, it can be a very dangerous job. And then also social effects. So like if we are legalizing prostitution, what does that do for the sexual relationship between men and women, for society more broadly? How does that affect the dating markets? How does that affect, how men are engaging with sex, whether or not they are, settling down and forming long pair bonds that are ultimately beneficial for society? These are all really important questions, and I think good reasons why we should ultimately be skeptical of prostitution.
So if I may,
respond to, sorry, go ahead, Wick.
I do have a question before you respond, just for clarity for me.
Mhm.
So you mentioned in this study that certain countries saw no correlation between legalizing sex work and sex trafficking, but other countries saw a sizable or significant increase. What, uh, in your opinion, what is the difference between these countries? What made it so some countries did have that increase, and what prevented this increase in other countries? Did the study mention that at all, or?
Yeah, so I believe the proposed reason, the proposed mechanism for why this is happening is like access to people who are vulnerable. And so when you have like these migration waves into Europe from Africa or from Eastern Europe, and you have people who are like not familiar with the local laws or language, they're more easy to be taken advantage of versus somewhere where you don't have these big migration waves, or where people generally who are migrating share the language already. And so really it's like when you have this confluence of like populations which are vulnerable with the legalization of sex work, that's when you have potential for danger.
Okay, I want to go to Madam Genevieve and then Stabby. So Madam Genevieve, you can respond, have back and forth, and then Stabby will get in there next.
Yeah. I'm moderately familiar with the study that you're referencing, and I think that there's been some response to that, or some conclusion drawn from that the areas where they're seeing an increase in trafficking after legalizing or decriminalizing sex work tend to be areas where there's higher demand for sexual relations in general. And by decriminalizing or legalizing, they're able to more clearly identify somebody who is trafficking versus having this confusion and conflation of somebody who's being coerced versus somebody who is working consensual. And so in decriminalizing it, we do see a lot of times an increase, but that's specifically because we're able to uncover them. It's not that it's happening more, it's that we're able to identify and react to them more appropriately.
Stabby, please.
That's exactly what I wanted to hit on, is that I've seen a lot of these studies where people who have recently decriminalized, not just legalization, but also decriminalized the industry, of course, they're seeing an uptick in these people because it's now safe for these women and these girls to come forward. So we're going to have to give it about 5 to 6 years for things to level out, because now these people are coming forward and saying, "Hey, I don't want to be in the sex industry. Help me." So of course we're finding more human trafficking because it's safe for them to say, "Help me, I've been trafficked." But it does remain true with what Taftash was just saying. If you are vulnerable and you can be blackmailed, then you can absolutely be, pushed into human trafficking. And all they have to do is get you prepared or threaten you and, get you back out there because they know that they can get you deported. So that still remains a problem as well. I just wanted to point out, we're going to find a lot of human trafficking the first days we decriminalize sex work.
Okay. If I may ask a question of the panel at large. So we're talking a lot about real life sex work. I want to kind of hit on online sex work, OnlyFans, pornography in general, that is
Sure.
primarily centered online. There have been studies, and there's been a lot of talk from more right-wing and conservative-leaning spaces that this has a detrimental effect on society, that it becomes addictive, that the way this is marketed towards men specifically is in a way predatory. Do we agree with those? Do we think that has any merit at all, or is that simply just reactionary people who are just hating on and trying to further stigmatize because of their religious beliefs? What's our feel on this thing?
It's
Well,
definitely a real effect. Yeah.
Well, I'll say it is an effect, but it's really complicated, honestly, because I think what everybody's really worried about in regards to this.
Just real quick, Stabby, we're getting an echo from you. Can you mute yourself real quick? Continue. I'm sorry I didn't interrupt you.
Yeah, it's okay. So when I attended one of the human trafficking rallies, there was a sex trafficking survivor there. Her name is Gabby Humphreys. You could probably look her up on YouTube. She talks about like one of the biggest things that they're running into as far as like pornography online is the fact that it's so easily accessible by children. Like the average age for a child accessing pornography is 11 nowadays because everybody's got a smartphone. And the thing is that, yeah, parents can be aware of what's going on, but it's not their kids they got to worry about. It's other kids that have access to smartphones and they're able to gain access to these websites. So the first thing is when it comes down to it is that if people are worried about it, that's where the parent comes in for responsibility. Talk to your kids before the internet does. That's like where parental responsibility comes into play. And two, if people have this concern about, pornography, it's because it's highly addictive and whatnot, and they're worried that it's going to affect relationships across the country. Well, let's take a man, for example, that watches more pornography than he does spending time with his wife, then obviously there is a huge problem, a disconnect between him and his wife. You can't really blame the sex industry for that, I would say, because if he's not willing to spend time with his wife because he's so addicted to it, then he's got the problem and he needs to get help for it.
Wait, you don't think that the industry and the way it's marketed has any responsibility at all?
But
I think
that issue of aggressive marketing and like cross-application marketing and very invasive marketing, like smart advertisements and stuff like that, that's an issue across the board. To single out pornography in this regard and focusing in on like the issue that some people can have in their interpersonal lives and like character growth from a porn addiction, you have that like across the board when it comes to advertising. That's just aggressive advertising like problem.
actually,
I
with,
think
like,
the pornography
with-
conversation should be like a little bit different from that.
Okay,
With
we're gonna go to tap
pornography, you
ads and somebody.
probably-
Tap ads and somebody. Go ahead.
With pornography, you probably have a lot less aggressive advertising, if anything. Advertising for pornographic services or for pornographic material is heavily restricted, and like most websites will not allow pornography advertising. You see porn ads on like other porn websites or on like websites that literally cannot get any other advertisers. Like 4chan has like pornography ads. So like I think that like if we're going to talk about advertising and smart advertising and whatnot, I really don't think that's to blame for people's porn addictions or for the consumption of pornography.
Also, I want to point out, if I may, really quickly, I want to point out that some advertisements for come to this porn site are less egregious than some of the things for Carl's Jr. or some kind of like skin tan lotion. Like those have been utterly ridiculous and quite embarrassing and kind of demeaning towards us, the consumer. And our kids are seeing that on primetime TV. Like the only time you're not going to see that is during cartoons. But the rest of the time, that's what they're seeing. So I do want to point that out, that we can have a problem with sexualized advertising content. And that can be a 100% separate issue from pornography advertising.
I feel like that is kind of a separate thing, though. There is like the general sexualization of society as a whole, and I feel like that really has more to do with like the fact that as society we're accepting sexuality as a more normal part of regular life than what we may have previously. Like we've been very repressed in the past. I think that like this thing with the algorithm affecting advertising and the methods of targeting advertising is something that society is like struggling with on a whole, like in every different aspect, like the sex industry using the same tool that Walmart and Amazon and the film industry and everybody else is using isn't necessarily like an issue. It's just we're noticing, hey, have you guys noticed that advertising is a lot more effective these days? I feel like this thing where there's this concern that men are like falling down in this hole and they're forming relationships with sex workers rather than forming relationships with people in real life is kind of a harken back to the parasociality
It's a
issue that we
parasocial
have,
thing.
that like we get accused of as Twitch streamers all the time. Like, these people in your audience, they should be outside playing football with their friends rather than watching online streams. And it's like,
Don't do
come
that,
on,
gang.
guys.
No
We're
one
here
leave your
entertaining
computers.
ourselves. You guys sit and watch TV, and it's no different that I can sit and type at my TV, and that the people on the TV go, "Oh yeah, you're right. I did read that thing. You made a good point, you moron." And then we can continue on from there.
Well, here's the other thing that you touched on is that society is more sexual now. And I think that's true in some of our, it's definitely true in our media, but people are actually having less sex now than they were in the 50s. And the younger generations are engaging in less sexual activity, despite the fact that so much of our media is so much more pornographic. And I think that's really scary in a way, because what we want in a healthy society is lots of relationship formations and lots of relationship buildings, and people to, feel free and comfortable to pursue sex, and men to have like the confidence to pursue women and whatnot. But in fact, we see like kind of the opposite, where there's like fewer and fewer men who are just, getting more and more of the sex, but overall there's a decrease in sexual activity. And I think that that's probably pretty scary. And I can't imagine it's helped by the fact that porn is so easily accessed by people. And so people have a kind of a replacement for those relationships, which is the parasociality and which is the pornography. And if you're a guy who, is not able to get women because you're suddenly thrust into this media environment and social landscape where it's easier than ever for lots of women to congregate around a few guys, I think the natural thing to do is to sort of turn to pornography. And I think that's really where you start seeing these, problematic addictions. And
You like,
Yeah.
are we positive about that? Because I understand where you can come to that conclusion. I would imagine I don't know the study that you have for that, but I'm sure it's in
about
reference
what
to a study.
specifically? Less sex?
Less sex.
Yeah. People are having less
So-
sex now. At least the younger
So-
generations. I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm sure like that study can jump to the conclusion of using porn as an example, but I imagine that I could probably look at that study and come to the same conclusion that just the internet has made us more antisocial, which makes us less capable of dating, less capable of finding a partner, and pornography just happens to be a thing that's also on the internet and can just make you a little bit less miserable in that like formula of misfortune.
Can I ask
Yeah,
you
that's a good
question
point.
about
To be
that, Terry?
clear, I'm speculating a little bit. I'm
Yeah.
speculating. That's like me. As far as why we're having less sex.
Certainly. To get more clarity on that, Cherry, though, you don't feel like pornography has any influence on this? You don't think that
It's
it
just
is
part of it.
So if we are saying that, like, if we're just jumping to theorizing, if people are having less sex today than they were before, pornography existed before, but the internet is very much newer, and I think more people are socializing through the internet. There was pornography before the internet. I remember my dad having those weird ass fucking compilation like VHS fucking videos. Like that shit still existed. There were Playboy magazines. People maybe didn't have as much access to them, but also not having access to them, like they had more of a real fucking life than they did having like sitting on the computer and
Sure.
talking to people in group chats.
Certainly, but it's like water. Water is great in small doses, right? It's helpful in small doses. But I think one of the things the internet has done with pornography is it's turned a trickle to a flood. And so we're drowning in it in a way. And yes, it's always been there, but now our access to it is so easy and so young. I remember the first time, again, I'm an older gentleman, right? I'm 38 years old, but the first time I saw any pornography, I was only 10. You know those AOL discs that used to come in the mail? I just popped that in.
Well, here's
Okay,
the
but
thing.
hold
it's so
on,
much
Wick.
easier. Go on.
Wanting to look at sex, anybody who looks at sex wants to have sex, okay? Most people are not just completely satisfied by looking at porn, but there is something that is inhibiting people from wanting to go out and get it themselves, And that's why there's a huge culture with red pill and PUAs.
Here's the other thing is that like look at who's like the most paid porn star now in our modern time, right? Who is it? It's Amaranth. Amaranth is the #1 OnlyFans creator, and she's someone who milks the fuck out of parasocial relationships on Twitch. Her business model is something that didn't exist 20 years ago. So the landscape and how porn is delivered and how people engage with it has really changed enormously. And I think that it's really the introduction of parasociality and mega, social media corporations, which have mastered the art of dopamine production and algorithmic, recommendations. I think that's when you start having all of these issues, because the ability to deliver pornography in a way that is addicting and parasocial has exploded. And I think that's really the deadly combination.
I want to go to Stabby, then Mr. Braindead. So Stabby, Mr. Braindead, Genevieve.
I want to address that less and less men are having more and more of the sex. That's an incel talking point, that 20% of the men are having 80% of the sex, which would mean 20% of the Earth's males would be having sex with 11,000 women per year.
I don't know the exact
they would have to-
breakdown. I'm not saying it's
right,
20%. I
right.
just
That's
it's like everything
yeah.
where it's a Pareto distribution.
Right. And we're thinking this, but I want to point something else out. What those studies have been mostly talking about are that youthful marriages are falling, which is absolutely fantastic. This did not happen in a vacuum. This did not happen all because of pornography and because of the internet. Yes, it's one of the contributing factors, but one of the contributing factors is the frequency of divorce and children going, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm going to wait a little longer. It's also the economy. It's a little more expensive to raise children now. So there are all of these reasons compounding why kids are getting married later and later, which in our current situation economically is a very good thing. We can't sit here. I've heard this hundreds of times. We need to be a less promiscuous society, but also men aren't getting enough sex. Go fuck them. Okay, well, let's pick a plot line because we can't do both of those things. So I want to make sure that as we're going forward, first of all, there are not less and less men having more and more of the sex. It's actually the men are beginning to drop, but the women who've been reporting has been almost basically the same since 2000.
As far as women having sex, right?
Yes, women self-reporting, of course. I want to be very clear, women self-reporting, and there's still some shame out there, but it stayed basically the same. So let's understand that it's a little bit more than just the internet, and we have other compounding factors, specifically the economy and being married later.
Well, I don't know. I think a better predictor for understanding this.
I don't mean to interrupt you, Tap Dash,
Okay.
but you can go. I'll let you respond, but then we got a line. So Braindead, then Genevieve.
We'll get into it later. I think that the digitalization of how people meet each other is a huge factor in this, but we'll talk about that later.
Braindead, you're up. Go ahead.
I was going to say that the algorithm, all right, that's for very mainstream sort of things. What we would call targeted advertising. You don't see porn in targeted advertising. You're going to see porn advertised widely because it's heavily regulated, right? It's restricted to non-mainstream websites that rely on it for advertising. That said, oh God, what's the point I was going to make?
Well, tell you what, you think on it.
Wait, I think I can help you.
Okay.
Are you about to link Are you about to link the fact that if you're already on a porn website and then you're being fed more porn links, that you're going to stay on the porn site longer? Because I don't think people stay on porn websites after they jerk off.
Oh yeah, they do. People watch porn all day long.
That's somebody who already has a porn addiction. Normal people, once they jerk off, they lock the fuck off.
Yeah, and people need more access in order to be able to treat their porn addiction and be able to have some sort of help for that, right? There's always going to be the possibility for addiction, of course. But I mean, there are support groups out there. There are health counseling, and it should be more widely available for people who seek treatment for addiction. So, I mean, that is something that can be done. There's always the potential, but I still think that they positives outweigh the negative.
Right?
No,
if you're saying the addiction's not a problem because we can help treat the addiction afterwards.
No, the addiction is a problem, but I'm saying that every single legal industry that we have that's sort of adult has the potential for addiction. Gambling, alcohol, tobacco.
There,
just like
there are ones
sugar,
that aren't for
right?
adult. Yeah, sugar can lead to addiction.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's a choice that I get to make. I want to participate in that activity, you know?
But like,
And
sorry.
That's fine.
if I partake in that activity, pay money to do it, it's okay. If I develop a problem, it's a problem. We're very fragile. We're complex. We're very fragile mentally, and you can become addicted to almost anything, like internet addiction.
We
I'm
do
sure
like we do like
we
to
stay online
regulate
for far too
people.
long.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need like regulations for these things. Like
Yeah, we
sugar's
do.
a good
We do, of
one
course.
where like sugar
Like-
can be very addictive, but like that's a
Exactly.
good reason to like maybe have regulations as far as like food for children or like taxes on sugar and whatnot. Like there are policies you can implement to help.
Because
Exactly,
eventually,
and that's what I mentioned earlier. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Cherry, but I said that's what I mentioned earlier with regulation, right? You could have you could have inspectors that come in to make sure that women aren't being, exploited in legal brothels or in online sex, online sex websites and adult video production companies and things like that. You can look out for the potential for exploitation and also trafficking, because some women still are trafficked or manipulated into porn, and we have to have better reporting for that. Also, you have the ability to have, ideally, and this is all hypothetical, right? This is the ideal situation, right?
Yeah, we got a
Ideally,
lot of
we would
people
have-
respond to you, Mr. Braindead. So and
Okay,
Genevieve's been
last
waiting.
last
right?
last point. I promise you. Ideally, we could have co-ops and units. All right, that way it lessens the exploitation on the person who's having a rent in a
did you say
brothel,
co-op
a space.
Wait, is your solution co-ops?
for the online?
No, I said
pornography
the potential. No, I was more mentioning legal brothels, but that's besides the point. All right, I said that there's the potential for that. All right, in that specific area. I'm done.
Okay, so what I wanted to say in response, I think I mostly agree with Tap Touch here. Like pointing to the sugar industry is a great example for why we do want to regulate and what addiction can do that causes harm to all of society. When you let an industry really become like predators, knowing that their substance is addictive and can cause harm to the consumer, they will think of profit over the consumer, and that in return puts it puts a burden on the people. Like right now, we have an obesity epidemic, and that is partially caused by the sugar industry. Fuck, I can't talk right now. But so you want to, you just want to stop those bitches, okay? I'm trying to do
Stop
this
those
without
bitches.
cursing. I
It's
can't.
okay. Madam Genevieve,
Disagree with you.
gotta let Madam Genevieve in, and then yeah, we got you. We got Tap Dash, we got Alex, and then if anyone else.
So when I first raised my hand, I was going to respond to a different point, but as we are now, I think that it's super, super important to recognize, as you guys have said, that anything has the ability to become addictive, right? Like sugar, alcohol, gambling, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a small percentage of people who consume these things who do become addicted in general. Most people who gamble don't become addicted to gambling. Most people who consume porn don't become addicted to porn. Most people who consume sugar don't necessarily become morbidly obese and diabetic. I mean, certainly there are cases where that happens, but they're kind of the exception. And so I think that in general, most people are able to find a balance where they're using these tools and these different forms of technology in a way that is healthy and it's not causing negative side effects. I think conversely, when we were talking about the parasocial elements that can come from consuming porn online or subscribing to OnlyFans or anything of that. I think that Cherry's point that the internet in general, I think you made the point that the internet in general makes us, changes the way that we have our relationships, changes the way that we interact with people. And then obviously, I don't know how recent the study that was originally referenced is. If it's super recent, then we're clearly going to see an impact of the pandemic on people's behaviors as well. But it could have been before 2020. I'm not sure what the timeline on that is. I think that a lot of people who are socially awkward or have a difficult time making relationships in public see benefits from new sites like streaming sites, OnlyFans, et cetera, because it does allow you to go ahead and build relationships if you choose to with people. You can find creators that will chat with you, talk with you, check in on how your day was. Like, it's not always necessarily sexual. It can be more of like a virtual girlfriend experience. And I think that that's a lot of value, because if that didn't exist, these people wouldn't necessarily just be like, oh, well, I don't have this as an option, I'm going to go out and be a ladies' man in public. They would just still be at home, just without any interaction.
So yeah, just to clarify, it's from 2008 to 2018, where the amount of, young Americans 18 to 29 who reported having no sex doubled. So that'd be pre-pandemic. And I actually don't know what the figures are post-pandemic. So who knows? Maybe they've exploded, or maybe they've gone down to zero. But, just in regards to what we're talking about earlier, what is the ideal business model for short-term profits? What is that? I think it's the opium den. It's, addiction. It's reliable customers. It's people who are willing to pay more and more money for the product. And so I think what you see in society is companies will get closer and closer to the opium den model of business, operation, and they will try to get as close as they can to that and extract as much profits as they can from a population. But the government needs to come in and regulate things, or it needs to provide sufficient, incentive not to engage in that kind of business practice. And so I think that you have these big media companies, big social media companies like Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, which are basically the digital equivalent of opium dens. They keep people on them as long as possible, and they have an active incentive to keep people addicted and to cause addiction. And so I think that's really like at the heart of the problem, is this kind of incentive structure.
So how would you like, we talk about regulations, right? Taft, we talk about like, okay, how do we regulate this? Do you have any specific regulations you would like to see when it comes to pornography online, and specifically,
I
what
think
kind of regulations can the government provide to prevent this kind of opium den mentality that you are asserting?
I think there should be, at least on the creator side, I think there should be a tax category for people who are making their money through, internet pornography, or even just like Twitch streamers, where like past the first, like $80,000 that you make, you are taxed like an extraordinarily high rate. So like, I think that if I were taxed like 80% or like 60% after the first $80,000, and then like 90% after the first $120,000, I think that could be like a good solution, because that'll, massively decrease the financial incentive to like enter into these markets in the first place. And that's like a very simple
You also
market solution.
support
You want
massive
to-
taxes on other high earning individuals in other industries.
Not necessarily.
pretty
I
wild
think specifically
Why?
with like
Wait,
sex
hold on.
workers.
So I think
Hold on.
sex workers in general are able to charge the prices that they do because of the risks that are inherent to the job. Generally, when we see a job that is higher risk, the worker has the potential to earn more.
Also, the time that you can spend doing sex work is minimal.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like
Also-
very little effort, and like online the risks are relatively minimal as well. And so I think that like lots of
No, I mean like
people-
the longevity of the career is very minimal.
Right.
Oh,
It's
that too,
generally
that
not
too.
something people approach as, I'm going to do this for 40 or 50 years, like you might do
Yeah.
in another career. So you want to make all of your money to
As much as
retire
possible.
in maybe a 10-year period. So that's another reason I think that justifies the income and not taxing them so much, because a lot of these women are not going to be able to continue to work once they hit a certain age. And obviously that's a generalization. There
And I
are women
don't
who
think that they
continue to
should
work
like
late.
get into the industry. Like the whole incentive structure is like you should decrease the incentive for people to enter the industry in the first
But-
place and to
Okay,
profit off
hold
of
on.
it.
Hold on. I'm sorry. There's roughly right now, according to global estimates, there's only 42 million prostitutes in the world. That's a lot. I know that's a lot, but I mean, consider we have 8 billion people on the planet. Yes, okay. When we're talking about addiction, we're mainly talking about pornography. But within pornography, if we're asking these sex workers to like, if we're trying to in some way cut out the incentive from this area, that's exactly what we're doing with prostitution now, and that hasn't worked for shit. We're not. Yes, we can definitely regulate it, like we regulate sugar now for food. That's great. but we're also acting like a minority of people who are becoming addicted. Like we can just blame our cell phones. We can just blame this profit margin, these algorithms, etc. There is a level of personal responsibility here that we have to take. This is not, oh my God, we were all such innocent little lambs before, social media companies came along. It's like, we really need to think about what we're saying here, because we're not okay. So there might be a slight rise in addictions, but that's still the minority. And that would be an argument for better mental health care and better mental health support, and less about something else. We've been regulating all of these different addictive substances, and we have seen again and again and again that if they get off of alcohol, they might begin to abuse tobacco. And when they're done abusing tobacco, they might begin to abuse marijuana. So
I think
like,
there's just a
I
little
don't know what
bit.
your point is.
I think
Like,
there's a little bit of like sex shame happening alongside with the think about the addiction that it's having on the consumers.
I think the reason you have so much pornography is because there's a massive financial incentive to produce pornography, and people will.
A lot of some
people
people
will
do
still-
like to get paid for work that they like to do, though.
Yeah, exactly. And like personally, I enjoy the process of like taking sexy pictures of myself and posting it on the internet. And I did that before I really like made lots of money from it. So like I think there are some people who are just like part of it is just like hobbyism for them. They just enjoy the act itself. And like personally, I am somewhat in this category. And so I think that like those people, there will always be people who post sexy pictures on the internet regardless of financial incentive. But the reason why you have so many people willing to go into the industry is because there's so much money in it. And to be clear,
So-
that money is it's very much
So
concentrated.
what's wrong
in
with
a
the
small group.
industry, though? Because it seems like you want to stigmatize people from getting into the industry.
Yeah, I
And
would
I
say
just
the
wanna know
problem is the prevalence.
why.
So like I think that the prevalence of pornography is really the contributor to the degree of pornography addiction and issues that young men are having with it. And so this is like obvious, but like if you don't have pornography or if you have much less pornography in general, your ability to find pornography that is like constantly new, constantly like activating your dopamine receptors to their maximum, you're constantly able to find more and more niche things. That's the kind of thing that you have with people who are pornography addicts. And people who are not addicted to pornography don't necessarily go down those rabbit holes or need to. And so by restricting like the prevalence of pornography, you're really hitting directly to like the ability of certain addictive personalities to engage in behavior that is destructive to themselves, while the rest of people who are engaging in responsible use are not really as affected. So, yeah.
Okay, so we do have a little bit of a line. I know Alex has been waiting for a little bit, so I want to get Alex in.
Yeah, I'll
and
shut
then-
up for a bit.
No, please, everyone, talking is good. We want people who are
panel.
passionate about it. We want people to interject and things like that. But we're going to go Alex, we're going to go Genevieve, then we're going to go Stabby in that order. Go ahead, Alex.
So when I was single, I was actually one of these, socially awkward people that was terrible at meeting women. That's why I frequented a lot of these websites, Specifically, there's one, it was like, I can't remember the website it was, but it's like where you would actually talk to girls online. But that's just because I was one of those socially awkward people. And that's one of the things. It's like we talk about like food, we talk about sugar, that the reason why people keep eating is because of their depressive state. Well, because I was so socially awkward, it was very, very hard for me to meet women. I mean, I don't have that problem anymore because I'm married. But the thing is, like when I was single, though, that was a problem that I did have. That's why, it was kind of like an escape for me. Now, I don't speak for all men that partake in this stuff like that, but this was just my personal anecdotal experience. But it was kind of like an escape. I have a hard time talking to women because I'm just so awkward to be around sometimes. I stumble and fumble with my words, it can be a little bit embarrassing, but like behind a computer, I can be a totally different person. I mean, I'm still me, but I'm just not socially awkward in that regard. Now, that's that draw that kind of comes into it. That's why some men frequent strip clubs because, you just pay $20 to the dancer on stage and there's little to nothing, no real interactions you have there. But the thing is, like when guys get told, like somebody like me, like when I was single, when I'm told that I'm actually like hot, it may not be true, but like it's kind of a confidence boost as well. So it's kind of like feeding into the was it the dopamine? I think that kind of feeds into it as well. So it's a whole bunch of contributing factors in regards to this, and I think that's some of the things that that we're taking into consideration of guys that have a hard time meeting women. So this is like their escape. This is their means of exploring and things like that. So that's just my personal anecdotal story.
Oh no, that's a great story because again, I wanted people who had participated in the sex industry as both producers and consumers. So that's a good perspective to have. Stabby and then Genevieve, please.
So I pointed out in chat that there were phalluses being drawn into what looks like drips coming from a rather pretty pussy, like on the walls of Pompeii. If I promise you that the pornography, even if nobody is making it, if nobody's actually sharing their body for it, it will get made. We have that as far back as the ancient times. I also wanted to point something out with sex work and kind of removing the stigma, how some people have to meet women this way, how they might be doing this, to feed their family or just because they like it and it's casual. We have to start thinking of the problems with pornography from a way that's not so much our embarrassment and shame and our repressive attitudes about sex when we don't do anything about sexual assault or any of these other things. We just want to judge people who are consenting in sex. And the biggest problem with pornography is actually about how it affects men. And if we can start approaching pornography from, how many women here have noticed that they think you can do a certain thing and you're trying to explain to them, actually, that doesn't feel like what you think it feels like. They're just doing that with her legs so the camera can fit. Here's what you're actually after. Like you have to sit there and coach them. I've also met men who think they're supposed to last for a full hour constantly, no
Oh my
changes
God.
in position. Like guys, porn isn't real. We have to start approaching the problems of porn by trying to make men's lives better when they're intimate with people. And let's start bringing some humanity into the issues of porn and then revisit what else we think is wrong instead of this repressive, ooh, sex icky type of response. I don't know, let's start doing it better. Because right now, I think the biggest problem with porn is it's making men really shit lovers. So let's focus on that one instead.
So Genevieve
say-
then brain dead. Genevieve then
Okay.
brain dead.
Thank you. I think that's a super important point. Like we need to remember as a society that porn is entertainment. It's not sex education. It's not realistic. When porn stars go home and have sex with their partners, they're not having the kind of sex that you see on camera. That's absolutely a performance and for entertainment. And if we view it as such, then we're more likely to have healthy relationships with it. Conversely, I'm a huge advocate, or not conversely, additionally, excuse me, I'm a huge advocate for sex education in general. And I think that leads to a lot better understanding when we do see something crazy happening in porn, we can understand that what's actually happening and not be miseducated or misguided. I want to also kind of build on what Alex had talked about. I think that building social skills and maybe building confidence in some of these men who do choose to have more of like a virtual girlfriend experience is a really important benefit that it can provide. I know in like pickup artist communities, for example, you've got men supporting other men, letting them know like, oh, you look better when you wear this color, or that photograph of you is more attractive, or, this joke or story is super funny. You should tell that when you're meeting a new person, whatever the case may be. I think that there's infinitely more value when feedback of that nature can come from somebody of the opposite sex, somebody who is of what the person is seeking to gain, right? Like, so if a woman can give a man advice on how to maybe be more comfortable around other women, I think that that's inherently more valuable. And some of my favorite clients that I have are the ones who, we don't always talk about sexual stuff. We talk about all sorts of things, their day, what video games they're playing, what restaurant they went to, so on and so forth. And it builds their confidence so that when they do meet somebody in real life, they feel less nervous approaching her maybe, or talking to her, because we've been able to kind of help with his insecurities in that regard.
Okay. Brain dead, please.
Actually, she had most of what I was going to say. I was just, but the main point being that awareness and access to more broad forms of education to help spread awareness, right? You have to educate people, and you have to be able to discuss these things in a way that is real and the potential benefits, the potential consequences, etc. You let people know, because if you don't educate people on these things in school or have the availability to educate people on these things in school, it's going to happen. It's going to be a lot worse. So that's really the only other point I had. So thank you, Genevieve.
So when Gabby Humphreys was talking about why it's so important for parents to talk to their kids because they have such quick access to porn sites, she said the reason why is because she started talking to her kids when they were like 10 or 11. She says, "This what you're seeing is not real. This is fantasy," because some people like some younger men, I guess, are getting this idea. This is how women like this and things like that, but it's all fantasy, and some of them need to have that understanding, which I'm pretty sure Genevieve would agree that's where the education really comes into play, because honestly, if people say, "Oh well, I saw this on a porn last night," granted, it's probably not exactly going to go over too well. I mean, if you want to take some tips, fine, but it's just pick up a book. There's plenty of books out there to read. Don't use like Pornhub as like a how-to guide. It's kind of a bad idea, in my personal opinion. That is.
I think it can be maybe beneficial. Sorry,
Genevieve, and brain dead.
I'll just
And
react real
Lincoln,
quick. I think that
answer.
Pornhub or other porn can be beneficial to maybe give you ideas or inspiration. And so making sure that you're viewing it through this entertainment sense, the same way that you do an action movie or something, can be really healthy. And I think that in real life, sex workers can be super beneficial to this as well, because they are professionals. They have a tremendous amount of knowledge. So if you see a particular activity that you are interested about in porn or wherever, pursuing a sex worker to explore that is probably your best option, because chances are they're going to have some experience with it. They're going to know how to go about it in a safe way for everybody and help you find some realistic expectations as far as like, okay, well, that's maybe not realistic in that clip that you're seeing, but what we can do is really similar here, and so on and so forth. So it can help you to safely explore your interests in that regard.
Yeah, and you have to be able to make sure that people understand that this is fantasy. It's not something that you really should try in real life. Really, what you should be doing is talking to your partner, if you have one, about their likes and dislikes in the bedroom. Learn how to communicate together. And if you can't do that, then maybe you need to work on things so that you can do that. Because that's just going to cause confusion and potential harm and pain and everything else. But yeah, making sure that people understand it's fantasy and making sure people understand that a lot of porn is simulated. So some of those things that you're seeing, sure, they're kinky, but it's not going to be comfortable for like the broad majority of women. So,
If I may, so first of all, somebody, we lost you. I don't know if you're still here. You're it's a screen of doom right now. I don't know what's going on. Hopefully, he can get back on and we can get some input from him. But if you don't mind, I would like to turn the subject, because we've talked a lot of relationships and how pornography and the sex industry affects relationships. I want to focus in on another industry that affects relationships, that is tangential. It's adjacent, but it is not the same as the sex industry. And this is the dating industry, the dating app industry. So if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about some things like Tinder or Bumble or these other sites. What do we think of those? Do we think that's been harmful or helpful to relationships, to how people interact, how the sexes interact one with another? Do we think that it's providing a good service, or is it causing harm? What are our thoughts here, gang?
I think it's going to provide a good service because of the pandemic. I feel like when the pandemic happened, all of the normal, maybe more socialized people started getting on those sites in order to interact and to meet others. So we basically we've got the inept mixed with the ept, and I think eventually we should even each other out.
I think
Yeah,
the thing
what
about
that
yeah, go
Well,
ahead. Sorry.
tap. No, first tap dash, and then we'll get.
go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just say this quickly then. I think that dating apps have really increased the competition, especially for men. And so, in the past, you might grow up in a hometown and like have very little interaction with like everyone in your city or people, outside of your hometown. And now, because of the internet, it's so much easier to potentially meet people who are everywhere around you. And so the competition has really increased massively. And I think it's led to a group of men, they're called incels online, but just like in general, men who are getting less and less sex, who really are like pushed to the outskirts of the dating market. But we'll get into that later.
Well, yeah,
So-
and I was gonna.
I feel like the dating app sort of environment is just kind of a result of the fact that more and more of our normal relationships are occurring online. I mean, I'm a male, so I can only refer to like my platonic male relationships in this regard, but that's where I meet most of my friends regardless. I would expect that I would also meet my romantic partners in a similar environment. And whether I am somehow bumping into them in Discord the way that I meet like my associates that I like have these types of conversations with, or whether I meet them via some other tool where we're like amassing people that have the same goal. I think that we run into a problem though, potentially, when we have sex workers that start going into places like Tinder and start advertising. And conversely, I think that this kind of has changed the way that the game is played, so to speak. Whereas traditional courting techniques aren't going to translate as well into a digital environment as what people might hope.
I think the other thing is
Yeah.
that like there's been a total collapse in the kind of stories that we tell each other culturally as far as what constitutes good behavior from men to women, what constitutes courtship, what constitutes chivalry. I think that, we look at our grandparents and they had very clear ideas about like this is how the dating scene is going to work. The man's going to pay for the meal, he's going to give the woman his coat, etc., and etc. And that paradigm really collapsed, and now we have young men who are really uncertain in a lot of ways. They don't know if they should be paying for the meal or not. And
Honestly,
that's one thing, but like I think it speaks to like the total lack of direction that a lot of these guys have.
but that's kind of good because like all women don't like the same thing. And all men aren't capable of the same thing. So the further we stray from this is the ideal way to find a partner, I think the more people can start to find people that they like that fit them rather than try to fit into whatever like the Joneses are.
I
Wait,
kind of
Cherry.
disagree.
No,
What?
I want to push back against this a little bit,
Go
Cherry, if I
ahead.
may. So yeah, I get certain like rituals, right? Like we should probably move away from those. But when it comes to like norms in society about respecting women, I think that we shouldn't. There are some norms we should normalize. We should say, hey, look, this is the way you do it, and if you stray from this way, that's an
Wait, are you
issue.
saying that not paying for the first meal is not
No,
respecting a
that's a
woman?
ritual, right? That's a
Yeah, so
ritual.
I'm saying
So
that
when
like things
But I
like that
think
can go
women
out the
are
window.
liars.
Some people
Okay.
need you to pay, some people don't need you to
I
pay.
think
It
women
boils
will
down to
say
communication.
This
things.
whole
Women will be
implication
like,
of like, oh, somebody paid for my dinner. Now I'm expected to provide some sort of sexual service or something
Yeah.
as
Well,
well. I
no,
think
Exactly.
no.
Hey,
No,
one
no,
at a
no.
time. Hey, gang, one at a time. Let's go Taft, Stabby, and then Alex, and then we'll go.
Okay, I think women are the worst people you can ask for a lot of like dating advice because women will tell you things about what they want and like it's just terrible advice as far as like dating. Like women will like say that they want like this kind of independence. They don't want to be like taken care of. They don't want to like have the man pay for the dinner. But like the reality is that like if you do these things, like you will be much more successful. And this is like the unfortunate niche of like assholes like Andrew Tate who like because everyone else is like not delivering this message, they're able to like sneak in advice that's like okay, that's actually like pretty decent as far as dating, but under this like guise of like total toxic masculinity. And so I think that like we have to like acknowledge the reality that like a lot of these ways of interacting between the sexes and of like courtship, like they exist for a reason, and they exist because they work in a lot of ways. Like
Okay,
if you're a
but
man,
also,
like you have to like harness
So did
that
arranged
alpha masculine
so
energy
did,
to an extent.
yeah, so did arranged marriages, dowries, and selling your girls. Yeah, that was super traditional too.
It's a bold claim to say that
forgot
women
And
are
that.
the
it
worst
did
people
work
dating
for a
advice
lot of
as
cultures
well.
for a reason.
I
so
want
hold
to,
on.
yeah, I want to get
This goes.
Cherry a chance to
A
respond.
lot of
Cherry,
people
you
lived a
may.
lot of unhappy lives for that too. So
Is your name
I
Cherry? What's your
Yeah,
brain dead? Is your name Cherry?
it worked for the 11-year-old.
So this is things that I've heard before. I've heard it a lot, and it's sort of painting this like really narrow picture of a woman that I will admit might work a majority of the time. Okay, that hey, she's actually going to think of you ill if you can't pay for the meal. She's going to think of you ill if you split the check, or she's going to think of you ill if you don't take her to like the finest dining. You are painting the picture of a like pretty one-dimensional woman. But this also goes in reverse. There are a lot of girls who know that a guy likes if you're at least going to offer to pay a meal. So there, you will sometimes see girls do like a very shallow, hoping that nobody, like the guy won't follow through. Like, oh, I'll pull out my card real quick, when really she doesn't have any intention of it. These are just to like show you.
And they pull out their card super slowly. They're like,
Mm,
Digging in your purse for like
Yeah,
5 minutes. Like, where is
But-
that?
And these are two sides of the same coin where people are pretending to be something that they are not, or doing something that they are not for a favorable outcome, where we would like to move to a society where people are like really honest on their dates and see if they mesh or not, without playing like the bullshit pickup artist fucking games.
Okay, so Stabby Kirsch, and then Genevieve.
So those were outdated and they needed to move anyway because I have paid for a lot of my dates. And I think one of the problems so what ends up happening is when Andrew Tate is there talking about like things like that and who's paying for the first date, it all boils down to, oh no, I paid $70. Poor me, I'm being oppressed. And it sounds pathetic and absolutely ridiculous. And because I'm not going to do that when I pay for it. But I will tell you guys that I have a huge problem when it comes to dating. I don't like fancy restaurants. I usually don't like their food. I don't like pasta and I don't like seafood. So there goes some, more affordable and reachable types of things. And I just feel gross and uncomfy and itchy. I've got to sit there and like we've got to grill each other like we're cops. And I think I was just lucky because my ex-husband and I, what we did is we went to a taco truck, waited for a game event on one of our days off, and we were just like walking around. And then we went to this truck that had ice cream, like this gelato ice cream, and it was the best date of my life. And I got so spoiled by that when I dated again later, it was like, well, how about we go to the coffee shop and then walk down to the bookstore? And people have told me that it's really fun dating me, even if we don't stay dating. And that's what we do as friends, because I'm one of the people that absolutely despises to sit there and get interrogated. It feels awful. I feel awkward. I don't know how to answer, like, how long were you married? And you're like, and you've got to swallow and you've got to drink water really fast and you're embarrassed. I hate it. So I always whining about who is paying. That can be, I don't know, that needed to change in the first place. That can be settled like, I'll pay for this one and then you pay for the movie or something like that. Because we're not going to boil it all down to the failure of dating because one or the other has to pay for dates. And that old fashioned thing, I'll go full feminist there and say that needs to go because it's already a nightmare. I don't want to pay to sit there and be itchy and gross and hate the entire evening.
If you're a guy and you want to date successfully, be willing and able to like pay for things, okay? Because that will help you, all right? And like there are going to be women who like insist that they don't want to have things paid for, but like, and there are going to be like a legitimate number of like some women who do not want you to pay for things and would prefer to pay for things themselves, right? There's variance in the human population, but there's also a lot of women who are going to like say that they don't want you to pay for things. And it's the thing of like
That's
pulling the card
How
out
do-
slowly. Like,
How do poor people date?
what do you mean? Like poor people
Two
who
people
cannot
who are
afford
poor. How
anything?
can they go? Yeah,
Yeah,
there are
well,
people who can't go out to eat ever.
here's the thing: if you're a
They
poor
budget
guy,
all of their
if you're a
meals.
poor guy, You
alone
better hope
forever?
that you are very fucking handsome, okay? Because the
So
reality is
poor
that
and ugly is out.
because women, unfortunately, they go
You
for
are
men
doing the
who are
high
of
value man
yes,
meme.
and it's true. It's something that is the reality that women do not want to date poor guys, right? So you better hope that you're very competent in another area to make up for that. Because like if you're a guy, the reality is like having money helps you, right? And like it sucks
He's
if you're
twirling his
poor
beard.
and you can't do anything. But like if you
Oh,
have money, you should use that money.
why are there
The
poor
onus
couples?
on the man.
If
Why
we're
can't,
not,
why can't
if
a
we're
woman be a
not going,
breadwinner?
Because men are the ones who are
why?
struggling in this arena. Like, you know, what was said earlier is that like
Right,
the
but
sex for women, and I don't know if this is true, but like just going off what's been said earlier in the conversation, sex for women apparently is not decreased very much. So if that's true, then the sex in general for young people that's decreasing, that's coming all from the male side, which is really scary. And it's reflected in every guy who's ever talked to me about their experiences with online dating. It's brutal,
Poor
right?
people. I want to back you
So
up
I
a
think
little bit. I'm sorry. I
Oh,
need to
okay,
back
I
you
just
up.
yeah, I'll let you, but we do have a line that we need to get to. So after you, we're gonna go
Wait,
to Genevieve,
okay.
then Kirsch, then Dre Dead.
Every time we're talking about mating or population or replacement population or even abortion, the number of poor people who are having babies keeps getting brought up, and it's really weird that it's just going to be hard for them. Poor men who have wives outnumber like wealthy men and middle class men who have wives by the millions, by the hundreds of millions. So
But that's because
like
there's a
that's
lot more poor people
nonsense.
than very wealthy people. Like,
Exactly, but
of
they're
course.
still getting no, but stop. They're still getting partners.
Okay, but here's the thing. If you look at like the data on what women want, they want men who are like of equal socioeconomic status or higher, right? So like it's possible for poor men to date as long as they're competing with men who are also within the same socioeconomic bracket. The problem with Tinder and online dating apps is they expose women to a wide variety of men who are not necessarily all in the same socioeconomic bracket. And so given the option, women will prefer men who are earning higher amounts of money, right? And so that's again that Pareto distribution of a smaller amount of men who are getting more sex, and it's leaving a large amount of people like out of the population. So I'm not saying that like people who are poor, like poor men, cannot get wives. That's not true. What I'm saying is that women, if given the option, are going to prefer men who have higher socioeconomic status.
We
So
don't want our
I
children to work. We
I'm
don't want our
really
children
trying
to
not
work
to
for
interrupt,
McDonald's
but
for
Which is
them.
also that's kind of a good thing because like you want men to be able to provide lots for their women, and like ideally you would have like men who are very competent who are able to have like many children and provide for all of them. Like Elon Musk is a great
I
example
want
of
to
this.
respond.
He has
Oh
like
wow.
so many
But
children
we
and it's amazing. He should be
yeah, Cherry
propagating like
will
crazy.
you'll get a chance to respond. I promise you. Genevieve's been waiting. We're gonna let Genevieve go, and then we have a Kirsch, then Brain Dead, then Cherry. But go on, yeah, you guys can tackle on this. Go.
so I think that having this assumption of the most value that men can provide is money is really kind of an antiquated idea, and as we look for equality of gender, we need to move away from that.
Men
And
are
I think
such
that
fucking
there's
liars, dude.
some
Why are
people
women
clinging to the idea
liars?
because it's a lot easier to
Women will say
use
that
your
they don't
wallet
want money
to woo
because it's like
somebody than to have
selfish to
to
want
actually
money.
use your
But the fucking
personality,
reality,
right? Like if I can take someone out on
the fucking reality, and everyone knows this, is that if you have money as a man, you're more successful.
a lot less effort than me actually asking questions to get to know them, doing things that are thoughtful, that are maybe not expensive, so on and so forth. The reason I think that we run into a lot of challenges now with men in general not having as much sex or not having as an easy of time in the dating world is because the expectation of them is higher. They are now expected to bring a sparkling personality and other interesting things to the table, not just their earning power. Women are able to earn money on their own now, so they don't need somebody to pay their rent or buy them a car. What they need is somebody who's good company, who's going to make them feel good about themselves, who's going to challenge their opinions in a healthy way, and all of these other things that we can get from relationships that are not financial.
So I feel like when you do pull from the successful women, usually go for men who are as successful or more successful than them in earnings. I don't I can't jump to the conclusion that that has to do with money because those women generally should not need money. But I do think it jumps to how that person is fitting in society. Most people who are a high earner, they are probably very smart, very assimilated with society and stuff like that. They have charisma, they are successful, and people like that want other people with charisma that are assimilated into society. So you're not going to date down just because you can't deal with poor, but most men who don't earn very much, they are socially inept, probably lack charisma, probably lack confidence. There's other things that make them unattractive that doesn't have to do with money
All
that
these things
I
are
think women
correlated, right?
look for and
Sure,
fall in love for.
this sounds like a version of prosperity doctrine. Like the people who are charismatic and successful and are great to be company, they aren't poor. That's what it sounds like.
No. What she's saying is that people who are
Well,
charismatic
they're-
are more likely to be wealthy.
Yes,
And
so
s-
there are people who will date down. Those people are charismatic. Sometimes you stay poor because of like circumstance, but I'm just giving like a broad stroke to that statistic.
Right.
So-
Like if you're filling
So-
out your
oh, wait,
Tinder
well, if I
profile,
could.
you're going to want to choose somebody of equal or greater value because you can assume that they'll have similar ambition to you.
that's part of
So-
it. I think that, like, to be clear, it's not just that women end up dating people who are in the same or higher socioeconomic bracket. That's true, but like what I'm specifically referring to is like when you poll women and you ask them about this, they say that they prefer men who are of the same or higher.
Oh my god.
So it's
Okay,
like
but
actual
this is-
preferences, like explicitly.
I
stated.
just hold on. You have to let me, because I just saw a woman on Twitter brag about the fact that a man finished coming between her fucking thighs and she just let that fucking go. That's how she had sex, okay? This is the pool that you're,
she
that you're
didn't
going
say
from. Women who will
anything to
literally
him.
go out there, have sex with someone, and just let them fuck their thighs instead of enjoy it. So
If you're
sometimes
having
And if
bad
you
sex,
totally
don't know what they
earth
want in a
fall for that
relationship.
You gotta
scenario,
speak up.
like if
Ooh.
you're having sex and the guy's fucking your thighs and you don't say anything during sex,
Retarded
that's
child.
your fucking fault. Okay, I'm sorry. You have to take responsibility. If you're just letting that happen and you don't say anything, what do you expect? He's just going to like
my God.
mind read you? No, you have to like communicate with your partner.
Okay, we got
So-
we got to let Alex.
sorry.
We got to let
Yeah.
Alex.
It's okay. Yeah, it's very spirited. So that's actually online is actually how I met my wife. We've been together for 10 years, married for 8. Our anniversary is next week. But the thing is, though, is like when she and I went on our first date, it was a simple little cafe. Now, not all dating is like this, but this is why where conversation is so essential, because the main reason as to why relationships fail is because of a lack of communication. Lack of communication is why relationships fail across the board, because you don't tell them what you like, you don't tell them what you don't like, you don't ask them the questions like, okay, what kind of place you want to go to eat. Now, as far as like the man actually being expected to pay, okay, yeah, I can accept that some women might have that expectation. However, again, that's where the communication comes into effect. Now, the first date, I'm pretty sure I paid, it was years and years ago, but the thing is, though, is that usually, yes, I will pay because like I'm usually the breadwinner. But should men always be expected to pay? Well, no, not really. But again, that's where the whole communication comes into effect. Now, we can say it's like, oh, well, if a guy's like poor, he's obviously like, that's not necessarily true. There are some guys out there that are poor, but they are very charismatic. They just talk a really good game. They say, oh, well, I left my wallet at home. Or it's like, hey, do you think you can cover me this time? It's not.
May I
this
ask you a
simple-
question, Alex?
Yes,
May I ask
go
you
ahead.
a question on this?
Please
do you
do.
think that men are more likely to be successful on getting a first date if they offer to pay? Are they more likely or less likely to get that first date in general if they say, hey, don't worry, I'll pay for it?
I wouldn't say no. I would say no, because I think it's all about the conversation you have. Because if you're interesting, I don't think the woman's going to care usually, because if she's willing to go out on a date with you because of like the way you hold yourself, the way you present yourself is so important, because confidence is really, really important, especially because usually, like, I could be wrong, ladies, so please forgive me, but usually like when a woman starts talking to a guy, she's already imagining what kind of a future she might have with this guy. And if he has her interest, she may not really care about like whether he needs to pay. That's not gonna be the first thing she thinks about usually. She's probably wondering, does this guy carry himself well? Does he
I'm
seem
not saying that
responsible?
this is
Yeah.
like, let's say all this is equal. We have two
Sure.
equally charismatic gentlemen, right? Wick
Mhm.
and Wick 2, who are super charismatic. Wick 1 says, hey, and don't worry about it, I got it for the first date. Wick 2, however, says, you know what? You mind paying for me on this too? You mind treating me? Which do you think, Wick 1 or Wick 2? Which one's gonna get the lady?
Not if you say it like
That's-
that.
Yeah, that's
It's gonna
great stuff.
depend how
Wick
you
two-
say it.
didn't communicate this before the date, right?
You have to
No,
manipulate
this is-
her
Exactly.
into
This Wick is to say, you know, I do understand and I wouldn't want to diminish your agency at all in this situation. So I'd like to offer to let you choose the restaurant that we're going to eat at and give you the opportunity to pay, at least for your half, if you'd like.
So
I would offer options personally.
Yeah.
Hey,
I
you know, do you want me
yeah,
to pay? Do
I've
you want
had
to split this in half? What do you want to do?
This is
right, and
this is
but
terrible
but
advice.
there's
Don't
there
do that.
like the
Just
worst one
pay.
I've had when somebody does that is he's gone, yeah, this is basically like a more socially acceptable form of prostitution. And I never
Oh.
saw
Okay,
him
don't
again.
say that
Ever
either.
again.
That's so
No.
fucked
Yeah,
up.
yeah, never say that. I never went back.
That's
I was so
worse.
glad that I paid and that I didn't have to, like, have him do the whole little sex thing, which is obviously where he was leading. But one of the best ones I ever had that also taught me was he goes, "What do you say because I'm a really picky eater and women can never choose?" Which I was about to get mad at him for. But he followed it up so smoothly and he goes, "How about I take you to my favorite? It's this family Mexican restaurant. Dress down. I mean jeans because, you know, it's a family restaurant and we're going to eat outside. I'll pay for that one and then you can take me to your favorite restaurant," which I was thrilled with because
That's
then
so
it meant
cute.
that I didn't have to. I
That's good.
know. And
That's good. That's
Great.
I think
communication.
it can
It's one of
totally
my
be done in a cute way like that, where
Yeah.
maybe you say, you know, oh, I'm going to get this one, you can get the next one or something.
And
Personally, it's a turnoff for me if somebody makes the money too big of a deal. Like, I don't want you to be
yeah.
like, I'm going to take you out to dinner and you can get the lobster, baby. Like, fuck you, I'll buy my own lobster, you know?
I can let my dog out.
Well, here's the other
Exactly.
key
also,
though,
like,
is that like it's
I
reciprocal,
get that there
right?
could be some discourse about it, but keep it flirty, keep it fun, you know? Hey, I want to
Yeah.
take you to this
Exactly.
restaurant. And then next, if you took me to that place you were talking about, that would be really cool. Or, you know,
Exactly.
whatever.
It's cute. And then it provides you something else if you're paying attention. Now you get to know what they like. So instead of just like they like Mexican food, they like this particular sauce at this particular restaurant. And if you guys get together when she's pregnant, you know exactly what to go get her to remind her of that and to make her happy. So it's just a
Or
really good
or
way.
when you trigger her, you know to go to that restaurant and order the wrong
Yes.
thing.
So
That's
true.
the
Don't
person
buy
I
us dead
am.
plants. Yeah, I don't want dead plants and flowers. You better go get me the enchiladas that have that toasty cheese on top, and then I'll forgive anything. That partner knows that now because of how
Well,
cute he
this
was.
brings up an interesting question. This has been brought up, and I want to kind of talk about it and maybe ask the because I have you all here and you are a captive audience, and I can ask whatever questions. It's my damn show. I am curious, like what are some of the best things, the things that you were kind of leaning away from the guy or the girl, right? I want to ask the guys this. You're like, I don't know if I want a second date with this person, but then they had this line or did this saying or this sort of behavior that changed your mind. And you're like, wow, this is awesome. Because I think your stories, Tabby, was a great example of that. You're like, oh, I don't know about this. Oh, but hey, this is actually, you turned it around. You're really cool. Well, like if anyone wants to share an example of that, I think it'd be more than interested in hearing.
Well,
Yeah,
our
what
first
An example of the opposite.
Oh yeah,
Well,
opposite examples of two. Of
Yeah,
like
that's
it's
what
going
I have too.
swimmingly, it's going swimmingly, and then they step on this landmine and it's blown all to hell. Like that would be a good example too,
Okay.
I think.
Well, that's what I
But
told myself on my first date with my wife. I was like, don't screw this up. Don't screw this up. Because, you know, that's just like my own personal thing. But the thing is, you know, my wife and I on our first date, we stayed at that cafe for like 4 hours. And then we had another date already lined up afterwards. Is because like she and I had a lot in common. And that's what was so interesting about the both of us is that I come from a good family. I speak very highly about my family. She comes from a good, strong family. And she talked about her family as well. And like, even though we're from different parts of the country. I'm originally from Oregon. She's from Michigan. But the thing is, we had so much in common and we could relate to each other so well. And I was just really interested because, you know, my wife is amazingly intelligent and I was really, really captivated by her. And, you know, it's just, I was really, really wanting to, you know, have another date. And she wanted to have another date with me because like, you know, I didn't talk about me all the time. I didn't talk about how many crunches or stuff like that or how shredded I was or something like that. I just talked about like where I come from and the kind of family I have. And like, those are the things that like, if you have similar interests, those are the things that are going to make you want to have a second date, not because of how big your wallet is. And if that person's only chasing after your wallet, I mean, do you really want to be with this person? Or it's just because, oh, well, you know, I can't get another girl, so I have to make sure I keep paying for the meals because I want to keep bringing this girl out here. I mean, that's just the way it is, I think.
And it wasn't an interrogation. You guys got to talk about what mattered to you, and you guys
Mhm.
got to know more about each other because there wasn't any, where do you work? How long have you lived here? Where did you go to college? What color is your car? Like, it's really creepy.
Like, I
But
understand where hold on, oh wait, we're doing the story.
No, we could
yeah,
you could
when,
still
when I
talk about this, right? It's up to you.
yeah,
I
when I
just wanted to say,
communicate,
I understand where Taftage is coming from and the advice that she's giving, but I think that advice, while it can work for a lot of women, right? It can pull that woman. It's going to be a very superficial relationship, or you are generally going to have a relationship rooted in like just superficiality.
It's an all else equal thing, right? So like I think that you can have successful relationships where like you have the woman pay, right? And I think you can have successful relationships where you trade off, 25-75 or 50-50 or whatever. If you like negotiate that and it's the right person for that. But I think that if you're giving practical advice to young men who are struggling in the dating market, I think you have to say that, like, all else considered, you should be willing to pay for things because it's going to be received well if you're willing to do that. And we know this because women like report overall that this is what they prefer. And
Don't you
so,
think that you're telling them that their only value is going to be money if they haven't gotten a girl by now?
no, not the only value, but it's an important value, right? Like women value security and they value competency in the job market and in the economy. And so if you're going to be successful as, someone who's dating, I think you have to be willing to play to that. And like I'm also like I date women, like I have a girlfriend. And so I experience this a little bit from the other side as well. Where like I know that in scenarios where I'm paying for things and where I'm willing to like provide, and not just monetarily, but like if I really go into every social situation with the active intention of like, I am going to show that I can like engage with people in a very altruistic way, that's like the maximally beneficial way to develop relationship is to have
for
that kind of
you,
altruistic mindset. No, it's like you can have a man, right? You can tell two
Well,
men
just
like
you
you
if you just agree with him and say that that's what works for you, then you can't be wrong and you acknowledge that
no,
there are
it's
people
what
that are
works for
different than
men
you.
in general. So I'm not saying it's like everyone is going to have this in like 100% of scenarios. Because like you can run into a woman who's like, I never want a guy to pay for any of my things. You can run into that kind of girl. But I think you have to look at the person. You have to say, hey, you go by your dating advice and you go by my dating advice. And the guys who go by my dating advice and who are willing to pay for things for women are going to succeed more often, right? And that's at the end of the day is the important like bedrock foundation is that you're trying to give a dating advice for young men who are struggling, and the good dating advice is you need to like be a man and be willing to provide and to engage in economic displays of competency.
I am
yeah,
married
it's
and I
all it
date
all boils.
outside my marriage. Oh, you can go first.
I was going to say it all boils down to preference, right? That's why you communicate with people. That's why you try to understand a person. You try to understand what they believe in, what are their traditions, their values, etc. That doesn't mess with you. You're not going to be happy. So if you're going after someone solely for the fact that they're a man and they're competent and they make a lot of money and they're handsome or whatever, you might not end up in a happy relationship, which is why half of marriages end up in divorce, right? It's that traditional model. When women could start getting divorced from men, they did it because they wanted options. When I approach people, right, it's not genuinely just a physical attraction. It's not a monetary thing. It's an emotional thing and a cultural thing and a values thing, right? If I can have some sort of value that I share with someone, I have to communicate with them. I have to understand them. I have to know where they're coming from, what they believe in, etc. That involves me asking questions, actively listening,
Communication.
understanding their cues, etc. And it's all about preference. What do you want? A lot of women like big guys. A lot of women like tall guys. And if the vast majority of women like, financially stable and confident men, then that's great. But there are options out there for you.
So,
Not all women are happy in these relationships.
Mr. Brandon,
Communication.
just
It's
real quick,
not. Yeah.
Mr. Brandon, I do have a question for you on that because Taft's whole point, as I understand it, is that women lie about what they
So
want.
true.
They say they want this, but they don't actually want that. Do you think there's any truth to that?
Don't listen
Like,
to
and
women. Listen to
and
successful
this isn't
men.
just women as either. Like, men do this too. Men will say, you know, it's okay, but no, we don't mean that shit. No, we really want this, and we, you know, and we say, oh no, it's okay. You can choose what movie we see. But no, we're like, no, we really want to see SpongeBob. We don't want to see this romantic movie. We want to go see
I
SpongeBob,
think
right?
I think it has more with like men being like more assertive, because like the thing is like if you know what's it called? It's like that gag where like if a woman wants to go, it's like where we're going to eat? It was like just take a guess, and then when she says, "Oh, we're going to McDonald's." Yep, we're going to McDonald's. Like, oh, good, we're going to McDonald's. It's like that little game. It's like the whole guess game. The thing is, it's like sometimes a woman wants a man to just make the decision, because some
True.
women don't want to make the decision. You know, that's just usually how it is. But sometimes it's good to get feedback.
Women
That's
are
where,
sheep.
once
Okay?
again,
You need to lead
communication
women.
is the most essential key to
You
maintaining a
need to force
relationship.
women to
Hey,
respect.
Because
stop
if you
raising
don't-
your hand and just cut him
Well,
off. I'm
hold on.
sorry, but that
Real
guy looked like
fast.
he wanted to talk forever.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll be
I-
polite.
Yeah,
I'll let everybody go on and ramble and spurge and fill out all of their points as much as they'd like. I'm really like
Somebody,
opposed
you're
to
a
the
blank
general
void right
framing
now.
of this like topic in general at this point. Like, I try to move away from like gender specific, like this is the way that boys act, this is the way that girls act. Really good advice that I got really early on into my dating career is that people want to date competent people. You need to be able to bring something to the relationship, and then both of you go and build something
Very
together.
true.
You guys both need to want to go and do something fun. It's not going to be very fun if I go up to my friends and go, hey, I really want to go to the arcade. Do you have $20 so you can take me to the arcade? Nobody wants to go there. But if I go to my friends and go, hey, do you want to go to the arcade? I have $20. I'll give you 10. Now they're going to want to go a lot more because I just offered them money to go and do the fun thing with me. So if I go and ask a girl on a date and go, hey, do you want to go on a cruise with me? Oh, but it's going to cost you $500 for the ticket. They're not going to want to go. Versus if I go, here's a ticket for a cruise. Would you like to come with me? They're going to want to come and do the thing. You need to have something exciting and interesting about yourself that you can contribute to the group. And then the person is going to be excited about that interesting thing. If the exciting and interesting thing that you've got about you is that, hey, I'm really good at Fortnite, you better find a girl that's really interested in how good you are at Fortnite and that wants you to share that with her. Maybe that's
Yes.
a start of a great relationship.
And don't you
Competency is
okay,
Exactly.
but if you cannot afford to continuously bring this girl on exciting adventurous trips, you understand you're going to lose her.
Then
So
be
it's
really-
almost like we're giving advice to people who have the money to do it and telling everyone else you're fucked.
No, get
The
really
thing
good
that's
at something
exciting about
else.
you is how you
Okay.
skateboard.
Okay, we got to.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna step in and do some control because a lot of people want to speak. Okay, so somebody you can finish, and we got Madam Genevieve and Taft Dash. Go ahead.
Yeah, not saying that you have to take women out on like expensive cruises or partners out on expensive cruises to attract partners, but you need to find people that are excited to go do whatever it is that you want to do with them. Going hiking doesn't cost anything, and volunteering, hey, can I take you out hiking? Okay, now we got worries about the woods and all the rest of the things, but let's go ice skating. Figure out something that
Yes.
is inexpensive, but you need to like bring something to the table and say, let's go and do this together. It can't just be
Preferably something
wanna
that you're
stand
not
next to you.
faking. Preferably something that you're not faking. Don't pretend to like hikes with a girl and then all of a sudden on your 10th hike, like, listen, we're dating now. I've got to admit, I fucking hate the mountains. Can we stay home forever? You're not going to have a sustainable relationship that way. The same way
Right.
you would have gone broke going
Well,
to like fancy
relationships are give
restaurant.
and take, though. Some relationships are give and take, though.
Well, you have to manage
Yeah.
your communication and your expectations of the other person. I think that we all have a tendency to think like, what do I want in my perfect partner? What am I looking for in somebody that I want to date or be involved with? And we don't often flip that and think, what does my perfect partner want in their perfect partner? And am I rising to that level? Am I meeting what I think they would want from a partner as well? Because it has to be a two-way street. I think that being able to be really clear about our intentions is super crucial in that regard. In regards to who's paying for things, I think that we're kind of moving into a more modern understanding, at least in my experience and in my friends, where whoever does the asking or whoever initiates it, etiquette would dictate that that person would probably pay for the date, especially if it's a first date, right? So like if I'm going to ask Wick to join me at my favorite steakhouse, I'm going to pick up the tab because it was my invitation. He didn't say anything about going there until I was like, you know what? I think he would really enjoy this dinner. And it's a gift that I'm giving him, right? It's something that I'm being generous about because I want him to enjoy this experience, et cetera, versus, if it were the shoe on the other foot, I would expect if he were asking me to go somewhere that he would pick up the tab, at least as we're getting to know each other. Once the relationship progresses,
I'm just going to
things
be
can
very
change.
clear. I paid for everyone's invitation to my panel. Like all expenses were paid.
You
I
did. I
offered it
appreciate
up
that.
front. And
Yeah.
just a real quick aside, gang, if you're liking this content and you do want to show me appreciation, please consider subbing to the channel or following if you haven't. That'd be really appreciated. But I will allow the panel to go on. So I think it was after Madam Genevieve, we had Tapdash, and then Mr. Braindead.
Yeah, I'll just be quick. I think that like the reality is that there's a lot of guys who don't have money, right? And who are struggling in the dating market. And if you don't have money, the reality is, and I agree with like somebody online, guy with the glasses, more on this, where like you have to be competent in some area. So if you are not, making fat stacks or whatever, like be prepared to develop your skills. Go to the gym, really work on your physique, make sure you're grooming correctly. Like you have to do everything because the reality is that like all else equal, money is an advantage in the dating market for men. And so you got to be willing to like if you don't have money, be willing to like really put in the work elsewise or just have like incredible banter. But
Completely agree.
yeah.
You have to have a way to demonstrate your value and demonstrate what is exciting and beneficial. How are they going to benefit from having you in their
Yeah.
life?
You can't be poor and have the personality of a rock.
Yeah, nobody likes that.
I mean, unless you're shredded, right? Like you could be poor, have personality rock, but if you're attracted enough,
Time we're
it
hanging
won't
out,
fucking
I'm going to
matter.
continue hanging out with you.
Mr. Braindead, I believe you're up.
Yeah, of course, you have to have some sort of competency, right? Like, you're going to want to see someone who also likes that, particular dominant form of competency that you have. Again, it's all about what people are looking for emotionally. It's all about what people are looking for with their preference. Well, something we haven't touched on, right? How does this work with same-sex couples? Queer individuals, asexual people. How does that work? Do we have anyone on here that would fit that mold that is, in a same-sex relationship?
Yeah, I
Right?
said earlier, I'm dating a woman. I date women.
Oh, I didn't think
I'm
about that. I'm sorry to
pansexual
ask.
and polyamorous as well. So that kind of ties back into my previous thing. If I'm the person, if I'm doing the asking of whoever I'm going on a date with, then I'm probably going to assume that I'm going to pay. If they're asking me, I'm going to most likely assume that they're going to pay.
Yeah, again, you communicate with that with people, right? You have a conversation with someone
Yep.
if you like them. Ideally, you want to meet them. There's no guarantee in anything in life, right? So if you go on a date, you're not guaranteed to have sex with someone. It's just a very nice thing to do for someone, uh, even if you didn't like the date, right?
I
So
would say that I feel like somewhat guilty if I'm not paying for things. Because, like, if I'm dating someone and I know that I have a lot more ability to pay than they do, I think I just feel uncomfortable, like, forcing the other person to pay when I know that, like, I am not struggling financially. And I think that, like, partly what Genevieve is saying as well is that, like, because I take on the role of like the more like the asking partner or like the more dominant partner, I also tend to like fall into those male roles as well easier. But I think that like in combination with those two things, like it's much more natural for me to take on the paying role.
It
and
sounds
I
like
feel that
your
way too.
language
But
might be financially based, like giving gifts and treating people as a way that feels good for you to show them that you care about them. And I think that that's really valid.
exactly, and not everything has to be financially based. Not everything has to be emotionally based. It's balance, right? You have balance. If you like someone, you're going to want to do these things for someone because you are motivated to do those things for someone. It depends on the relationship. It depends on who's the breadwinner of the relationship.
Mr. Braindead, though, you're hitting on it, and you're hitting to Taft Dash's point in this. If you like someone, one of the ways you show that is by paying for things and giving gifts. And so
Yeah,
that
but
is
it's
one
not
of the
the
things that has been culturally kind of normalized for good or ill. Like, I'm not taking a side here. This is good or ill. But the whole point of this is a culturally normalized thing that people know you are interested if you express that interested by offering to pay. I
Wait,
like you're
how are you
picking on
gonna
this
butt back in when we finally got past that and got to
because
the
it's
nuanced
fun.
part? You're gonna bring
Yeah,
us
I
back
was
to
trying to
ignorance.
get to a
It's
point.
dragging
though.
us back down.
I'd like to actually hit on Wick's thing there, wherein it doesn't have to be an expensive gift. It doesn't have to be an expensive meal. If you have a good time with someone, it's an emotional connection. It doesn't matter where you're at. It doesn't matter what's going on. If you feel like you have an emotional connection to this person, an attraction to this person, whatever, you're going to want to be with this person. Vice versa. And again, that all depends on your interaction with that person. So if it goes badly, likely not going to have another date. But if it goes well, I think potential. You just have to work with things, you know?
Stabby, go ahead. Uh-oh, Stabby. Stabby,
Muted.
gift us with your voice, please. Like, give us the gift of actually hearing what you have to say.
She's not muted. It looks. Oh.
Try
Okay.
again. Try say so. Oh, you're muted now. Unmute yourself and go.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
There we
there.
go.
Can you hear me? Yay! All right. I had to take these off because I had a phone call. Okay. I want to follow up on what Mr. Braindead was just saying. I do want to point out really quickly. I had left before. I'm sorry, guys, but one of the things we were talking about is like I came in at the wrong time when Wick is all like, or be shredded and go to the gym, or like let's pause. If you're looking for longevity in a relationship, we were talking about prostitution, and I hate to break it to a lot of women out there who are in relationships. Yes, it is likely that they might still look at pornography. They might, there might still be sex work in their lives. So it's still kind of connected.
100%. They're
And
gonna look at pornography.
like when you're thinking about things like pickup artists and the red pills, notice how many times they've said they've dated a girl, but they're preaching to you about longevity of relationships, and they've broken up hundreds of times. You can be shredded and really handsome, and it's not going to last if you're a douchebag. So don't be a douchebag. Make sure that you're being honest and enjoying your time with somebody, because these relationships are going to have to take a lot of work. I'm polyamorous, and also I have some same-sex partners as well. And I have to say that the same-sex partnerships are a little bit easier only because we're already talking to one another. We're already communicating, and we're already understanding that sometimes spending time together is literally just being slobs, laying on the bed and like showing each other funny cat videos. And that's like a date. So you have to make sure that you like we're not doing all of these superfluous things, and we're not talking about just money. Just because it's a bit easier for wealthy men to get a partner doesn't mean it's easy for him to keep it. I'm going to go ahead and point to the very obvious divorce rates around us and show that that's not happening for some people who are not quite as traditional in their relationship setups. So just try to be honest and open, and understand that wanting to spend time with each other is the biggest portion of a relationship.
Yeah, and there's always established rules in relationships and things like that. It just, again, depending on your values, it depends on the kind of rules that you have in the relationship. You don't always have to go out. You don't always have to buy someone something. It's a gesture every once in a while, occasionally, whatever. It all depends on your circumstances and things like that too. Okay, a relationship doesn't need to be built monetarily; it needs to be built emotionally. So if you like to be with someone, you want to be with someone, you're going to like them, you're going to like doing things with them. You might like doing things apart from each other on occasion. You might like doing a lot of things together a lot of the time. It's varied, it's diverse. It's learning how to communicate with people to understand what you like and don't like. And if you dislike more than you like, there might be a physical attraction, a monetary attraction, but it's not going to work out. So yeah, there you go.
I do want to address that because I think there's something there to be talked on when it comes to dating and communication and things like that. I think that's worthy of discussion. But I do know some people have to go. I know somebody has another panel coming up, and I do want to say we are winding this down. I do want to give people in the audience a chance to ask questions of the panel, right? And so if you have questions, just highlight your message. I'll ask the panelists it. But I want to give somebody a chance to have an outro and to have his final say before we let him go off here. So we are winding down, gang. We do have a couple more things to say, but I just want to appreciate you guys for being here, audience. And again, if you have questions of anyone on the panel or the panel in general, please ask them now, and I will try to get as many as we can before their patience runs out with me, and I have to, let them free into the wild. Please, somebody.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to get out of here. Yeah, I hate to have to run. I've got to get over to
You're
visit
so
Stardust and do the whole
correct,
Chaos
ambivalent
Cast thing.
bastard.
I do want to
This is
thank you again so much for the
every
opportunity
time.
to be
That's
here.
so accurate.
Generally, as far as the topic goes, the society and the way that we approach relationships has changed a lot. COVID has affected a lot of things. It pushed us to the internet, and the way that we're finding new partners has changed. We've also begun to destigmatize the sex industry very dramatically and normalize it to an extent, and the internet and COVID has made it a far easier thing for a lot of people to access. And again, this is having like a lot of effects on society as things change, but this isn't a bad thing. We just need to like roll and adapt and be like, oh wait, no, this all makes sense, because frankly it all does make sense. We just need to make sure we're not hurting anybody. Wick, I want to thank you guys all again for letting me hang out and chat. I look forward to having future conversations with a number of you. Cherry, I understand we have an interview coming up with myself and Queen Alexa at some point in the near future. I hope, anyway. Maybe we'll get that put together. But anyway, I look forward to chatting with you all again soon. See you guys around. Thanks for letting me be here. Bye now, though.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
To the panel in general. I do have a comment on what Mr. Braindead said, and I'm curious how he would respond, and the rest of you would think. So we're talking as if the connection has already been made. You've arranged that first date, and that's why it's important to communicate. The person is already interested in you. But as in my experience, and as I've seen from other people's stories and anecdotes, getting that attention in the first place is becoming increasingly harder for certain categories of men who aren't monetarily wealthy, men who aren't physically attractive, men who have trouble communicating, right, in general, and being charming and witty. And this has become a greater and greater problem. As Taftash has mentioned, the competition has increased 100-fold. Before social media was a thing, you didn't have to compete with everyone in a 25-mile radius, right? Like, you only had to compete with a small group of people that
People at your church
the
or
person
your
you were
school.
interested in knew, right? And so like, this is all well and good, but much of the problem that people are seeing is actually getting past that first hurdle of being noticed and actually being able to be engaged. Does that make sense?
I mean, I think
Yeah.
people
Yes.
struggle with long-term relationships too. And I also think there's been like a breakdown of societal norms regarding long-term relationships, and decreased emphasis on the importance of family and of relationships and of marriage. And it's definitely fallen out of favor. And the modern way to live is as someone who's single for a long time and not super concerned with that, someone who's more concerned with their career and whatnot. And so, there's so many other exogenous factors that have really made it a lot harder for people to maintain these long-term relationships.
I think that in general, we're having to learn how to deal with this onslaught of options, not only in dating, but really in every aspect of our lives in like the modern world with technology. We have so many choices for what we can watch. We have choices for what kind of food we can have delivered. We can just swipe and have choices for who we want to date. And it is kind of overwhelming for our brains, I think, a lot of time. And we need to take a break from that, I think, to kind of reset occasionally. But also, I think that kind of in response, or to build on Taftaj's point, a lot of people in our generation, and also the younger generation, millennials and Gen Z, are products of divorced parents. And so a lot of us saw these kind of difficult relationships and how much pain could be caused when they don't work. And I think that did instill kind of a bit of hesitancy in some people to feel like they want to protect themselves from going through that painful situation, as in their own relationships.
And single,
Well-
mother households are some of the worst things for developing young men. and one of the greatest predictors of adolescent and adulthood engagement in crime. So yeah, there's a huge downstream effect socially and culturally if you are having like a breakdown of familial relationships.
Well, I think a lot of it kind of comes down to is like some people in the younger generation, some of them like kind of give up on a relationship like sometimes a little too easily. Like at the first sign of trouble, they just think like, oh yeah, if I get married to this person, I'm just gonna have like nothing but sex all the time. But then they realize there's actually more to a relationship than just having sexual intercourse. And then like at the first sign of trouble, like they think life is just supposed to be easy and everything like that, but it's not. It takes a lot of work. And like, especially like if you want to have longevity, you have to take into consideration that there's gonna be problems along the way. I'm not saying you guys are gonna fight each other. I'm just saying there are going to be issues along the way, because after a while, she's gonna wonder if you're committed, or if he's gonna wonder if you're committed. Then you two are gonna want to move in together. There's a lot that kind of plays into it. But again, it all comes down to like how the couple communicates with one another. And if the communication is not there, if they don't want to tell each other certain things, maybe it's because they're not ready, or it's just there are some things they just don't tell their partner, period. It's because of like trust issues. There's so much that really plays into when it comes down to why relationships fail, whether they're short term or long term, really.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, we don't have good examples of healthy relationships, and then we also don't have good examples
Oh,
as a result.
we
Yeah,
missed all of that. You were roboting. Can you try repeating that, please, Madam Genevieve?
Sorry. Another consequence of not having healthy adult relationship visible and accessible to us as children is that we also don't learn how to work through conflict in a healthy way and how to problem solve and compromise.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Were you talking about the approach and how to like actually talk to people, how you initiate things? Was that what you were harping on?
Harping on what loaded term there? But no, I was simply mentioning, right, that approaching, like they're approaching women or approaching men, for that matter, right, is something that our culture. Well, let me start over. The approach as a culture is heavily weighted toward men. Men are expected to be the aggressor, for lack of a better term, to be the initiator, to be the one who starts the ball rolling by expressing their interest initially. And that is an issue, right? It has become an issue in our society, especially for men who just aren't good at that and who don't have any outward, like peacock style ways of displaying their worth, such as wealth or looks. And
Exactly.
that's become a problem. That's what I was saying.
There need to be more options for people who don't have the advantages that the so-called default have, right? So you find out what demographics need the most help, and you try to figure out how to help them. Help isn't doing this isn't universally, one way or one standard, right? It's all about your values. No, me personally, I am the person who likes to pursue. Generally, I'm a pretty social person, so I like to go out, uh, and socialize, and I will start conversation with people, and we'll just have casual conversations. And maybe if I've interested that person enough, and or if they've intrigued me enough, I might be ballsy enough to ask if they want to hit me up on social media, or even their number, text, things like that. Uh, and that's just me personally. I like meeting people in person. Again, online dating can be a preference for people because it's easier because of work or whatever. You might not have the time to go out and do stuff like that. That's also fine. Uh, there's some issues with online dating, but of course, there's an issue with dating in general because we instill a lot of toxicity in culture, and that's usually taught more towards the masculine part of culture, right? So where's the breakdown, right? Where's the breaking point? Like what's broken, right?
The welfare
And also,
state.
my generation, I'm a millennial, we're less likely to be able to have the advantages that our parents had, and maybe our grandparents, if they were boomers, to be able to have more stable financial opportunities and stuff like that. Because we are preyed on, we are exploited a lot, and that falls into the whole dating thing too.
I
Okay,
It's
just
all correlated.
we
Wick
gotta get other people in here, so we're gonna let Cherry go, and then yeah, if you want to raise your hand, and then Stabby, I guess.
Wick, I just want to say that I watched way too many lectures about prostitution and the legality or of the future prospect of the career between the issues between legalizing versus decriminalizing. I watched too much of that shit for where this panel went. Okay.
We can get back to it. We can talk about how, because this is all interrelated, Cherry. It's all interrelated. The way that men and women interact, I would assert, has been influenced detrimentally
So you're
by pornography.
Whoa,
okay.
quickly. I think that like another thing to consider here is that like the degree to which your culture, your nation, is able to produce successive generations is foundational to its success. And I think it's really worrying when you see like the steep decline of birth rates across the developed world. And the number one thing that like correlates with this beyond anything else is the strength of the government programs and the welfare state. And so I think that in the past, you had people who were really invested in creating relationships that were long lasting and that would produce many children that would then grow up and be able to provide for them. And that was a real sense, there was a real sense of filial piety in that, and the roles of mothers and fathers and sons and daughters and how they related to each other. And those things have been sort of replaced by the modern economic system and the ability for the government to step in as a kind of surrogate parent, where you can live a life where you make a lot of money when you are young, and that goes into a pension fund, and you live off of that, and you don't actually need to have that real stable relationship. So I think that if we want to preserve humanity and civilizations,
No.
I think we have to fundamentally destroy this kind of
No,
this
the
kind
past
of
generation want to
maternal
preserve
Hey,
their
hey,
ideal.
Wait, I was
relationship
supposed
that
to
the
be next.
state has, and we need to bring back the traditional forms of relating to each other and developing relationships.
Okay, so
I was
a lot of
supposed to
people
be.
want to
I
get
was
in here.
supposed to be.
And also,
Stabby, go
men should
ahead.
have multiple
No,
wives.
I was supposed to be next. I was actually supposed to be next, and we got to listen to something read off of a 4chan thing that we've heard a billion freaking times. And first of all, it's 100% completely wrong. One of the first, yeah, it is
It's
Taptash.
so right. It's
I mean, you
100%
can,
right.
like, no, it's not. Go to a church and find your mate there, because
Okay,
that's where the
civilization's
traditional
not
are
going
supposed
to
be
exist
finding
in
it.
the future
No.
if the birth
Stop,
rate does not
stop.
increase.
So go to a church and find your partner. Now let me finish, because I was supposed to be next before Taptash went on another pre-written monologue thing. So Taptash, listen. Actually, I just want to point something out. One of the things we saw with single parent homes, you mentioned that, and that's when you started on this some kind of a incel rant or something. We had widows. We had millions of widows, tens of millions of widows around the United States, around all over the world after World War II. They were all raised by a single parent home. And one of the biggest things that we did is all of society went, oh, fuck, we really fucked up. We have to help raise these kids as quickly as we possibly can. They're going to have to be mature sooner. Kids were still a little more mature sooner. The growth of the teenager began like roughly in the 20s. So they, most like their big sisters, their big siblings and stuff had jobs when they were kids. So they kind of got this little bit of a break, and then they lost their fathers, and they didn't have that break. And what we did with those single family homes, because they were widows, we never talk about it because we find that to be moral, and we find divorce to be immoral. So we don't want to talk about how the entire community and all of the United States banded together with these programs to help these children, because we took their fathers from them to the tune of 80 million fucking people. Like that's absolutely bonkers. And we still managed to keep our children in focus. One of the problems with this particular panel is we've been talking about kids getting a hold of pornography being something we absolutely want to stop. And we've also been talking about human trafficking with children and how we want that to stop. That's the only time we focused on children whatsoever. And when we're talking about dating, when we're talking about men and women, divorce, widowhood, widowers, we're talking about a fear that we have that is based off of children, not men at all. So you're wrong about those programs, because really quickly, Wick, in Scandinavia, where they just now did the child support stipend instead of child support coming from the man, it's not only that they found out that these couples were getting along better and that these children were being better taken care of and that men were finally not held underneath the ridiculous strictures of child support, but they also found that divorces began to drop, because once the couple had a child care stipend and the entire country was focused on children, the stressors that helped lead to a divorce began to drop. So no, you don't get to do, oh, the nanny state government. Everybody should just like be
I
left
want to
out there
let
on their own and
No,
let's get married
I
then.
don't know what
I
you
want to
think
give
is
Tap Dash
exactly
a chance to
wrong,
respond.
but like it's absolutely true that the biggest predictor for whether or not a state has declining birth rates is the relative strength of the government's programs, especially those that exist for people later in life. Right. So like it's possible that you have better divorce rates, but like there have been
I'm
lots
sorry,
and
I'm
lots
sorry,
of
but wait,
government
wait,
You
programs.
got, hey,
that's
Stabby, you got to
because
let her finish, but then and a couple people
Yeah.
need to go. So I'm gonna let Tap Dash finish. I'm gonna let a couple people out their outro, and then if you guys want to keep fighting, I will keep hosting it.
A
But
lot of people
Tap Dash, please finish.
a lot of people who are much smarter than me have tried to design government programs in order to encourage people to have children and to raise children. And pretty much across the board, they've made just tiny dents in the birth rate. And you see this, everywhere, where lots of governments are really invested in trying to increase this, but they don't seem to work. And so like the one thing really is the strength of the welfare state.
Okay, so I'm gonna let you a chance to respond, Stabby. I am, but we'd have to give a couple people an outro.
Okay.
It's Cherry has to
I'll say
go.
one thing.
Okay. Mine's
Okay.
gonna be super quick. I gotta go. Bye.
Okay, love you, Cherry. Bye.
Love you,
And Alex
Cherry.
has
Bye.
to go as well. So bye. I'll shout you both out in chat. Gang, go get them a follow. Go get them some attention too. It's Cherry and Alex Kirsch, both excellent. I'll shout them both out in chat. Thank you.
All right, take
But
care.
you may respond, and then we have other people wanting in. So
And then,
I
yeah,
want to give some
absolutely.
insight onto this as well.
Yeah, I'm going to be super fast, I promise. The reason you're seeing a lowered birth rate and the reason we gained 5 billion people in less than a century. That's never happened before. And we're probably in the next century going to be just fine as well and keep climbing. So the reason you're seeing a lowered birth rate is because I don't have to have 8 children to maybe hope that 3 of them survive. I have a 100% success rate. Both of my children are have hit puberty. My son is through it. That's
not what
2
birth rate
children,
means.
2 pregnancies,
Oh, God.
100%. If I wanted to do something like that only 100 years ago, I needed to have roughly 12 pregnancies with miscarriages and 8 live births to even hope to have 2 surviving children. So that's why you're
It
seeing the
doesn't
falling
explain
birth
why
rates.
people
It's like people
continue
don't
to
know
have
how
children.
bad things were 100 years ago.
we're gonna go
Well-
Madam Cherry and then Tap Dash. Go ahead.
Madam Genevieve.
Oh, I'm sorry, Madam Genevieve. My apologies.
Oh, no problem.
I heard it. I didn't want to say anything.
I think that Stabby, you touched on actually what I wanted to bring up, and that's that we've seen over human history the birth rates decrease as humanity has gotten more civilized, right? And so each step up of like levels of civilization generally results in our birth rate decreasing. So it is true that when people lived,
Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but did you switch mics? It's super hard to hear you now.
oh geez, okay,
Yeah.
hold on. I didn't switch mics. If someone else wants to go though, I'll come right back.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
so go ahead.
I'd like to harp on this a little bit. Well, the strength of the social programs rely solely on the amount that we fund them, right? And if the amount that we fund them is too low and it doesn't benefit more people, then there's no real value to them because people just become reliant on them, right? You have to be able to be able to help people and also be able to educate people and also be able to, give people the option to be able to have the opportunity to get education and work. It's not really happening as often anymore. I see a lot of people out there, saying that you don't need to go to school, you get a trade job. What if you're not skilled enough to get a trade job or that's not something that you're meant to do? Not everyone's meant to do certain things, not everyone's built to do certain tasks. But again, declining birth rates over the last, 4 decades, right? That could be due to people being in bad financial situations. That could be people who are in poverty and the rise in contraception, people who don't want to have children. you shouldn't have to have a kid if you don't want to have a kid. So there's a lot of factors within that. I'm not an expert in this though, so I just kind of wanted to bring that up to see what other people thought.
Okay. Well, if anyone wants to respond, they may. But if we are winding down, I do want to give everyone a chance to kind of have an outro, a closing statement on this if they want. We've touched on a lot. It's kind of gone all over the place. I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank my viewers for putting up with all the interruptions and the technical difficulties. Gang, if you've liked this content, please, I could use the follows, I could use the subscribes, I could use some money, right? I'll post a link to my GoFundMe in chat. I want to thank some of the donations. We've raised about $250 direct donations to my GoFundMe, and I really appreciate you for that. So thank you. But I want to give everyone here a chance to have a closing statement, and then we'll kind of wind down and raid out. I guess, Taptage, are you going to be streaming after this or no?
No, I'm gonna get
Okay.
going.
What about you, Madam Genevieve? Are you still going to be streaming or?
I'm having some technical
Oh,
difficulties.
yeah,
I
you're,
may need to
it's
solve
hard to
that.
hear you. It's hard to hear.
Yes, I'm sorry.
We'll
I
figure
don't
it
know
out.
what happened. Like everything is
Yeah.
exactly the same as it has been.
Okay, but thank you. Thank you again. We'll start with Stabby and we'll kind of go in reverse order. Stabby, tell people where they can find you.
I just you guys can find me on like I do need help with some polls and stuff. I'm starting a Patreon so you guys can give me a little bit of guidance on the videos I'm going to make. I want to buy a landfill and turn it into a library of reclaimed trash. So that's kind of my goal is to like show people how you can reuse things, how you can use fabric to make quilts, etc. So mine is Patreon and /Stabby Defarge, like Madame Defarge from Tale of Two Cities. You guys can find me there. For my to close out, I want to say things were almost ridiculous 100 years ago, and I want people to focus on how much that's gotten different. How much has gotten different. We also didn't used to have elderly care facilities, and we didn't used to have daycares 100 years ago. I'm personally, my most conservative take is that we should all come back into a strong family unit and home, um, and not have those two things on either bookends. But you have to actually take those things into account and stop using statistics to kind of make these ridiculous postulations that are just making things worse. No, the internet is not destroying your mind. No, like you do have to be careful, but it's not hurting you. No, you are not evil or wicked for looking at pornography. Just understand that it's a fantasy. And yes, sex
Yes,
work
you
should
are.
be
You're
legal because we
evil.
want to make sure we can regulate it.
Thanks for being on the show, Stabby. We always appreciate you
Absolutely.
and your perspective. We'll have you on again, gang. Check her out, her Patreon. I hope I spelled it correctly. I put a link to it in chat, and you can answer her polls and give her all the help she needs, please. Next up, we have Taft Dash.
Okay, yeah, I'll finish closing statements quickly. Just in regards to like advancing medical technology, the reason why we suspect that it has to do less with advancing medical technology and more the role of the state is because you can control for the advancements of medical technology and medical access. And so you can look at two different countries and one will have better or worse medical access, but the better predictor is the role of the state. So that's why I bring up the welfare state and its relationship to families. In general, I talk about politics. I have very syncretic views. I have politics that are kind of hard to pin down. But if you're interested in seeing more, I stream Taftage on Twitter and Twitch, Twitch, and YouTube. And I have a few accounts. If you Google Taftage, you'll find my main Twitter, and that has a link to my Safe for Work, just politics Twitter as well.
Yeah, I want to thank you for coming on, being willing to share your experiences and share your syncretic views, which I think needs to be shared more. So appreciate having you on. Love to have you on again in the future. Next up, we got Mr. Braindead, please.
Hey, I'm Mr. Braindead. If you want to follow me on Twitter, you can. I rarely ever post there.
Okay,
I'm mostly
I
just a
gotta
chatter,
go,
most
guys.
Twitch chats. I don't stream. I
It's
don't
been
really do
lovely.
anything on the platform. It's like having conversations with people. So, if we were to have a closing statement, I guess more understanding, regulation, education, awareness, things like that would be a lot more beneficial to people than just outright, restricting or banning it. So just teach people things. You have to teach people things and have equity in teaching so they can understand things because people don't learn things.
Thank you for being.
All right, well, I've got to get going. It's been lovely, guys. I will raid someone before I leave. So I am going to raid Stardust. Stardust. I love her. She's great. We might be doing a panel show together with her and Destiny. We'll have to see. But yeah, check her out. And make sure she knows that I sent you, because I really love you all, and I think it's really cool that I'm able to, help other people out by, sending people their way. So definitely check her out, even if it's just for a little bit. See what she's up to. I think she's doing her panel today, so if you like this kind of stuff, you'll probably like her as well.